Chapter 51, The Conspiracies Discovered, 2. Director's Office, DMLE. Saul Croker stepped into Amelia's office and froze. It seems Amelia had added something really lovely to her flow entrance, though he started to wonder how she was able to get her hands on some of his blood. Something to think about at a later date. An amused smirk appeared on his face when he noticed that Amelia wasn't alone. Alastair Moody was staring at him with an apprehensive look on his face, and he was looking extremely uncomfortable. He wanted to giggle, but that would have ruined his gig. He knew why the man was looking so apprehensive. It was so easy to mess with the man. Saul grinned mischievously, as he stepped forward, not bothered by the fact that either Amelia or Alastair might notice the mischievous look on his face. He was still wearing his hood, so his face was still obscured. He noticed the fire whiskey at the table and started to wonder. There were two possibilities. Either Amelia and Alastair were catching up, or they were discussing something really serious. After some consideration, he quickly dismissed the former possibility. If the two of them were catching up, then they wouldn't have summoned him. He might be able to call Amelia a friend, but Alastair was not one of his friends, even though he loved to mess with the man. He pulled back the empty seat and plopped down before patting his robes. Amelia, he said while nodding his head before turning his head toward the other occupant of the room. Alastair, he gave the man a nod as a greeting before finally turning back toward Amelia. So, how can this humble ministry servant assist you, Amelia? Saul asked in an indifferent tone, not giving away any of his emotions even though he was really intrigued. Alastair snorted derisively when Saul called himself a humble ministry servant. Saul, before I say anything. This is really serious, Saul. Can I trust you to keep everything we discuss to yourself? Amelia asked with a grave look on her face, and Saul gave himself a mental pat for reading the situation accurately. As long as it doesn't pose any threat to my department, I will keep this meeting to myself, Saul agreed without wasting much time. He knew Amelia and Alastair well enough to know that the two of them weren't going to plan a coup or something along those lines. Amelia nodded her head as a look of relief surfaced on her face, and then she turned toward Alastair. The man intently glared at Saul for the next few seconds before turning toward Amelia. He gave her a stiff nod and Amelia seemed to relax in her seat. A drink, Saul? Amelia offered as she turned toward Saul. Sure. Saul immediately accepted the offer without a second thought. He had to admit that Amelia seems to have good taste in alcohol, and there was no way he was going to refuse such a nice drink. Good. You will need it by the time we are done, Amelia grunted as she opened her drawer to grab another glass. Meanwhile, Saul raised his brows in question as he started to wonder exactly what the three of them were going to discuss and what could be so serious that he was going to need a drink. Amelia poured drinks for all of them and then she finally started to speak. Saul had to admit, the topic was really serious enough, and by the end of it, he already had 3 drinks. Alastair also kept giving his input from time to time. By the time Amelia and Alastair finished speaking, Saul was sporting a massive frown on his face. He kept tapping his fingers on the desk for the next couple of minutes. Amelia and Alastair simply kept watching the man without saying anything. They really wanted to know if the man could really provide them with the answers they wanted or not. We don't know much about love magic, but we believe that love is the strongest emotion. Even love potions can't produce love. Even Amortinia, the strongest love potion, can only create infatuation. Lily Potter's sacrifice might have invoked some sort of love magic. In that regard, I agree with Dumbledore. Saul answered thoughtfully after a long pause of silence. Her sacrifice might have created some sort of protection ward around Harry Potter and anyone related to her blood. After all, he did survive the killing curse, which is completely unheard of, and love magic is definitely strong enough to perform such a feat, Saul admitted slowly. Sorry, I couldn't confirm anything else in regard to love magic. I could have told you more after conducting some tests on Harry Potter. Saul waved his hand dismissively. Both Amelia and Alastair decided to ignore the fact that Saul was talking about conducting experiments on the vaunted boy who lived. It is not death magic. We know a lot more about death magic, and death magic is just that. Death magic. It kills, and most of our research on death magic is based on the Veil of Death, Saul explained with a hint of clear disinterest in his voice. As for a prophecy. Yes, he might have referred to a prophecy. I don't know if there is a prophecy regarding the boy who lived or not, but I can easily solve the issue. Saul admitted as he slowly stood up. How? Amelia asked as she stood up too. Now, she was also desperate for answers, and Alastair was already feeling along the same lines. By visiting the Hall of Prophecies, how else? Saul beamed at the duo. Come, follow me. Saul added cheerfully as he made his way toward the flue. Amelia and Alastor looked at each other before the two of them shrugged and decided to follow Saul through the flue. The two of them appeared inside Saul's office. This wasn't the first time Amelia was in his office, but this was definitely the first time Alastor was in his office, and paranoia senses were going haywire. He wanted to run and never return. Saul was waiting for the duo by the door. Let's go, you two. Saul called out, acting like an excited child on a sugar rush. Unspeakables were inherently a curious bunch, so it was obvious that he was also excited to know why Albus was so obsessed with the boy. Saul led the duo down the halls and Alastor was barely holding himself back from flinging spells. Saul led the duo through the time room. Amelia and Alastor stared at the huge assortment of time turners with a bit of awe and apprehensiveness. Welcome to the Hall of Prophecies. Saul declared dramatically as pushed open another door, revealing a dark room. The trio entered the room and Amelia and Alastor couldn't help but gape at the sight in front of them. The ceiling was high as that of a cathedral and the room was filled with row upon row of towering shelves. On the shelves, there were hundreds of small, dusty, glass orbs with a yellowed and dusty label affixed below each of the orbs. The only light in the room was coming from blue-flamed candles, which were affixed on uniform intervals. Good morning, number 72, as you can see, I have brought a couple of guests with me. There is something we want to confirm, so can I have the catalog? Saul spoke out loud while looking toward his right and a man shimmered into existence. As expected, the man's identity was hidden under the hood. Amelia and Alastor tensed as the man approached them. Good luck. The man said and handed over a diary to Saul. Saul thanked the man and the man simply disappeared into the darkness. Saul opened the diary and wrote something on the diary with his wand. Well, I will be damned. There is really a prophecy regarding Harry Potter. Saul gushed out excitedly and started to move. He was so excited that he completely forgot that Amelia and Alastor were there too. Alastor growled unhappily and rushed behind the man. Amelia simply pursed her lips and followed Saul. The orbs seemed to be glowing with a dull glow, but the two of them noticed that some of the orbs were dark. Saul, why are some of the orbs not glowing? Amelia asked curiously. Oh. Well, each orb contains a prophecy and when a prophecy is fulfilled, the orb stops glowing. By the way, don't touch any of the orbs or you will go mad, Saul explained without bothering to look back. Both Amelia and Alastor grimaced and shrank away from the shelves as much as they could. We are here. Saul declared as he arrived in front of row 97. Aha! Here it is. Saul declared as he pointed at an orb. The orb was filled with some sort of swirling white liquid. The three of them stepped forward to read the yellowed label affixed below the glowing orb. S.P.T to A.P.W.B.D. Dark Lord. End. Harry Potter. Sybil Patricia Trelawney gave this prophecy to Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Saul mumbled, his voice laced with awe and fascination, but Amelia and Alastor were white as sheets. The bloody orb was still glowing and the Dark Lord mentioned on the label could be only Voldemort. The prophecy was still active, which meant Voldemort was still alive. The two of them reached the same conclusion and they felt a chill run down their spines. Saul, the prophecy is still active, right? Amelia's voice hitched. Yes, Saul mumbled as he slowly turned around. Then you know who is still alive? Alastor asked even though he already knew the answer. Yes, Saul mumbled as he turned around to stare at the glowing orb. Voldemort was still alive and now Saul really wanted to know how. He already started to draw some theories inside his mind, completely unbothered by the fact that Amelia and Alastor were still white as sheets at the grave implications of the prophecy. 4th floor, St. Mungo's Hospital, July 8, 1994. Sirius Black shot up while gasping for air. He frantically looked around, trying to figure out where the fuck he was. He was having a really bad nightmare where he saw James and Lily cursing him for failing Harry. When he finally started to calm down, he remembered that yesterday he was transferred to St. Mungo's after his trial. He placed a hand over his face, only to find that his face was drenched with sweat. He looked beside his table to find a jug filled with water. He didn't even bother to pour water into the glass and started to drink straight from the jug. After gulping down a lot of water, he returned the jug to the table, which was beside his bed before he started to recall his trial. The trial was pretty straightforward. He was summoned in front of Wizengamot along with Peter Pettigrew. Sirius readily agreed to tell his story under the influence of Veritaserum and Peter was forced to take Veritaserum. Before the trial, his lawyer had informed him that the trial was pretty much a done deal, and even if he refused from saying anything, all of his charges will be dropped and he will be released. Apparently, they were simply holding the trail for appearance's sake. Sirius couldn't help but feel enraged when he remembered that people like Lucius Malfoy and Theodore Nott Sr. were sitting among the ruling body of magical Britain while he was tossed into Azkaban without a trial. Minister Cornelius Fudge declared him innocent and offered him a sum of 30,000 galleons for each year of his wrongful imprisonment at the end of the trial. That was a lot of gold, but the years he lost couldn't be compared with any amount of gold he received. Sirius mused bitterly when Albus Dumbledore of all people asked for leniency on Peter Pettigrew's regard when the minister suggested giving him the kiss or tossing him through the veil. Ultimately, Peter Pettigrew was given a life sentence in Azkaban. Sirius felt viciously gleeful when he realized that Peter was going to spend the rest of his life in the company of Dementors. Though after a few seconds, the smile on his face dropped when he remembered that he couldn't meet his godson because he was in America, attending Ilvermorny, instead of Hogwarts. He started to wonder how Harry was going to react after meeting him. He just hoped that Harry found it in himself to forgive him somewhere down the line. Chapter 52, The Fun They Had, I. Jacqueline woke up feeling her body sore all over. Harry was so wild and rough with her. He didn't even allow her to take any breaks. He was so relentless that he didn't even give her time to catch her breath. She was barely able to hold back her moans and groans until they were finally finished. He ruined me for any other man. I am going to be really cross if he doesn't take responsibility, Jacqueline huffed as she slowly sat up, wincing in pain. Yet, Harry didn't go easy on her. He might have taken it easy on her if she had said anything, but she liked how rough he was with her, so she refrained from saying anything. How are you feeling? Harry's voice rang out, breaking her out of her musings. She turned toward the origin of the voice, only to find Harry standing at the door with 2 steaming cups in his hands. Jacqueline smiled softly, but moments later, she huffed at him with a look of irritation surfacing on her face. Sore, Jacqueline grumbled, but Harry simply gave her a lopsided grin. I didn't hear you complaining even once, Harry argued back in an amused tone with a playful smile playing on his lips. Fair enough. Jacqueline admitted as she smiled softly and placed her hands over her abdomen. She rubbed her abdomen. I am pretty sure that you left me bruised and battered, Jacqueline whined and started to pout. Harry chuckled after hearing her words and started to make his way toward her. You might be complaining, but I think you enjoyed yourself to the fullest, Harry pointed out as he handed a steaming cup to Jacqueline. She accepted the cup and gave him a grateful smile. She took a sip from the cup and nodded her head in satisfaction. Not as good as Norton makes, but it's still good, Jacqueline nodded her head as started to enjoy her coffee. By the way, how long was I out? Jacqueline asked curiously. I decided to let you rest for a couple of hours, Harry answered as he sat down beside Jacqueline and took a sip from his own cup. Jacqueline looked completely horrified at his answer. Shit. Why? I need as much training as I can get. Jacqueline whined, sounding really impatient. We have been training for 5 days and you are already improving, Harry pointed out firmly. Then your core was also empty. After I knocked out your lights, I checked your core and you also had a small concussion when you dropped and hit the back of your bed against the floor, Harry pointed out with a blank look on his face. Jacqueline gave him a sheepish look. Ah. Jacqueline mumbled sheepishly as she rubbed the back of her head and winced. She felt the lump. I wanted to take you to your room, but I couldn't as I didn't want to deal with your father, so I conjured a bed for you here, Harry added, and Jacqueline couldn't help but give him a grateful look. My core was also nearly empty, so I needed a break too, Harry shrugged as he continued to sip coffee from his cup. Thanks, Jacqueline mumbled and continued to drink her coffee. After that, the two of them continued to enjoy coffee in complete silence. Do you really think I am improving? After a couple of minutes, Jacqueline finally asked with a hint of desperation in her voice. She knew she wasn't the best. After all, Harry was only 14 and she was always getting her ass kicked by him. Yes, your power and speed haven't improved, but your movements are becoming more efficient. Harry answered without missing a beat. Though I am still getting my ass handed, Jacqueline grumbled unhappily, making Harry smirk. Well, I do have a couple of advantages. My stature is smaller, which means I am a small target. I am also faster than you and magical core is a lot bigger than yours. Almost 3 times bigger than yours, which means I can keep casting longer than you, Harry pointed out with a shrug. Yes, he was glad that Jacqueline couldn't defeat him anymore, but at the same time, she was also his best friend. Yet. Jacqueline muttered sullenly as she nodded her head in understanding. She could understand what he was trying to say, but it didn't mean that she was happy about it. Don't worry, Jackie, you will be more than ready by the time trials roll in. Harry tried to comfort Jacqueline when he noticed how sullen she was looking. You will wipe the floor with them, Harry assured with a grin, and Jacqueline couldn't help but smile at him. Thanks for believing in me. Jacqueline gave him a grateful look. Can you hand me the pain-relieving potions? Jacqueline requested, and instead of answering, Harry simply pointed his wand at the shelf and a potion vial floated in front of Jacqueline. She gave him a look as she grabbed the potion vial. You are getting really good at point casting and silent casting, Jacqueline pointed out as she emptied her coffee cup. She placed the cup under her bed before downing the potion in one go. She grimaced at the taste, but she easily forced herself to swallow the horrid concoction as she had gotten quite used to the horrible taste. Fruits of hard work, I guess, Harry mused as he also emptied his coffee cup. Though sometimes I still can't believe the fact that you are only 14 with how fast you have been progressing. Jacqueline grinned as she already started to feel better. The pain-relieving potion already taking its effect. By the way, Harry, I am going to Spain tomorrow to get a couple of ingredients, wanna tag along? Jacqueline asked, and Harry immediately agreed with her offer. Spain was the only country where the unforgivables were still legal, along with a lot of dark arts. He couldn't miss this chance to get his hands on some of that knowledge. Good, the portkey will activate at 9:30 am sharp, and don't mind me if I join you for breakfast, Jacqueline explained, and Harry couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at her. He was quite aware of the fact that Jacqueline loved Norton's cooking, but he couldn't understand why Daniel Harper was allowing her to spend so much time with him. From what he knew about the man should be throwing a fit. Is your father all right with that? Harry asked curiously. The smile on Jacqueline's face faltered and her face started to twitch. I am not saying he was happy, but you know how the saying goes, happy wife and happy life. Jacqueline spoke while looking away, and even though Harry didn't get the reference at first, his mom was more than happy to explain the reference to him. After Lily explained the reference to him, Harry decided to drop the matter. He really didn't want to know what Daniel and Madison Harper were getting up to. I see. As long as he is fine with it. By the way, we are still meeting Brittany in the evening, right? Harry asked as he jumped off the bed. Jacqueline also followed his lead and climbed out of the bed. With a flick of his wand, Harry dispersed the bed. There is something else I wanted your help with. Jacqueline said nervously while trying to look into Harry's eyes. Harry simply raised his brows and told her to continue. Well, you remember how I told you that it is rude to ask someone if they performed rituals, right? Jacqueline asked nervously. Harry could tell where this was going, but he still told her to continue. To be honest, he didn't know if he should answer her question or keep it to himself. Maybe his mom will be able to help him. You don't need to tell me which rituals you performed or anything, but can you recommend me some rituals? Jacqueline blurted out her request. After listening to her request, he didn't give her the answer in an instant. Instead, he decided to take some time. Jacqueline realized that he was probably wondering if he should accept her request or not, but in reality, Harry was having a conversation with his mom. Mom, what do you think? Harry asked in an unsure tone. I think you should help her. You know Voldemort will be back, right? You will need strong friends if you want to face him and his Death Eaters. I also like her, Lily answered after a few moments of silence. To be honest, she wanted to be the only woman or girl close to her Hadrian, but Jacqueline and Brittany were already close to him. So, instead of making him try to push them away, she decided that they might become useful in the future if Hadrian could form strong bonds with them. Then there was also the fact that Jacqueline loved dueling. She didn't know how the girl would fare in a real fight, but she was already showing some good signs. Unlike other girls of her age, Jacqueline didn't have any boyfriends. She didn't even seem to be interested in a relationship. Unlike other girls of her age, she also didn't seem to be interested in other girly stuff. Jacqueline was only interested in training and dueling. Lily realized that she might be reading the whole situation wrong, but Jacqueline seemed to be getting off from intense duels. She couldn't be sure as Jacqueline never brought up boys in their conversations. In some regards, Jacqueline was quite similar to Harry. Okay. I will help you, Harry agreed with Jacqueline's request while nodding his head. By the way, we still have some time, do you have another beatdown? Harry asked as he backed away toward the other side of the training room. You are on, kiddo. Jacqueline wanted to pull him into a hug when he agreed to her request, but she dismissed the hug when he taunted her. Yes, she was probably going to lose, but she wasn't going to make it easy for him. Chapter 53, The Fun They Had, 2. So, what are we watching? Brittany asked curiously as she looked around the cinema hall. This wasn't the first time they came to a cinema hall, so they were quite familiar with the surroundings. Let's watch Speed, Harry said as he pointed at the poster of a bus on a highway. Jacqueline quirked her head sideways to look at the poster, and after thinking for a bit, she nodded her head in satisfaction. That is what we are going to watch, Jacqueline said firmly. The two of you get some popcorn while I get the tickets, Jacqueline said before she walked away while waving at the duo. Action, thriller. Brittany mumbled as she read the genre of the movie from the poster. She didn't mind action/thriller movies even though her favorites were action/adventure movies. Brittany, let's go. Jacqueline will be back shortly with the tickets, Harry called out. Brittany turned toward him and gave him a nod before the two of them started to make their way to the popcorn shop. After buying 3 buckets of popcorn, the two of them also decided to buy cola to go along with the popcorn. After getting everything they wanted to buy, they returned to their initial spot, only to find Jacqueline waiting for the two of them with tickets in her hand. Good. You guys got cola too? Jacqueline beamed at the duo and helped them with the cola cups and popcorn buckets. Even though they still had 15 minutes before the movie started, they decided to enter the theater and wait inside. The three of them quickly found their seats and started to chat among themselves. Slowly people also started to trickle in and the hall started to fill. Thankfully, their seats were at the back of the hall, so they weren't going to have any problems watching the movie. SHH, it's about to start. Jacqueline mumbled impatiently as the lights inside the hall finally turned off. Harry and Brittany were also excited about the movie even though the two of them didn't show it on their faces. Time skip, 2.5 hours. I have to admit. I loved the movie, Lily admitted inside Harry's mind as they finally walked out of the halls after finishing the movie. Movies have improved a lot since my time, Lily mused thoughtfully, and Harry couldn't help but sigh in exasperation. Mom, you are acting like you were born a century ago, Harry internally groaned. By the way, did you save the movie in my library? Harry asked as he could recall the whole movie perfectly. Yes. Yes, I did. I do need some entertainment other than the books, Lily explained. And Hadrian, you shouldn't call a woman old. It is quite rude, Lily added sweetly, and Harry felt a chill run down his spine. His mom's words might have been sweet, but her intentions were anything but sweet. I am sorry, Mum. Harry immediately mumbled an apology and Lily immediately beamed at him with a bright smile plastered on her face. Don't worry, son. It's all right. You are still young, so it's quite understandable that you make mistakes, but what's important is that you are learning from your mistakes, Lily praised him while sounding proud. After all, she couldn't have her Hadrian thinking of her as an old woman. Harry, are you all right? Brittany asked with a hint of concern in her voice as she poked his shoulder. You have been completely silent since we left the theater, Brittany added when Harry finally turned to look at her. Ah. I am sorry. I was just lost in my thoughts. Harry quickly smiled and waved off her concerns. Don't mind him. He does that sometimes, Jacqueline chirped in from the side. I didn't know that you watched me so closely, Harry drawled blandly, making Jacqueline chuckle in amusement. She placed her hand over his head and ruffled his hair. I have to keep an eye on you or you might end up doing something dangerous, Jacqueline answered with a lopsided grin on her face. Haha. Very funny, Jackie. All three of us know quite well who is more suicidal between the two of us, Harry pointed out with a shrug, making Jacqueline turn toward Brittany to ask her opinion, but Brittany wasn't looking at her. In fact, the younger girl was forcing herself to look away from Jacqueline. Jacqueline huffed in annoyance. Fine. I was planning to treat the two of you with some ice cream, but since the two of you want to be mean, I am treating you no more. Jacqueline started to pout childishly. Okay. Let her be the child, Brittany. We can get ice cream for ourselves, Harry said smugly as he started to lead Brittany toward the ice cream stall. Brittany quickly followed Harry while snickering in amusement. Jacqueline growled in anger as a vein popped up at the top of her head. You brats! You better not leave me behind! Jacqueline growled as she quickly rushed behind the two of them. Unlike Brittany and Harry, Jacqueline was never a loner, but after graduating, she kind of grew apart from her friends as almost all of them joined MCU after graduating while she decided to pursue a dueling career. The next day Harry woke up with another morning wood. He simply decided to wait for a couple of minutes for it to go away. As soon as his boner was gone, he climbed out of his bed and called Norton. What best Norton doing for Master Hadrian? Norton asked eagerly. Harry yawned as he stretched his body. Can you make something nice for breakfast? Jackie is going to join us and we will be leaving at 9:30 sharp, Harry requested as he rubbed his eyes. Of course, Master Hadrian. Norton exclaimed cheerfully and popped away. Harry stared at the spot Norton was standing and shook his head in amusement. Norton was probably the most excitable house elf. A/N, cough Dobby cough. Good morning, Mom. Harry greeted his mom as he started to make his way toward the bathroom. Good morning, Hadrian. Did you sleep well? Lily asked as she greeted him back. Yeah, Mom. So, what are you doing? Harry asked curiously as he entered the bathroom. He quickly took off his boxers and stepped under the shower. Did you rewatch the movie? Harry asked as he turned on the water. He hissed in satisfaction as the warm water rained over his body. Magic for the win. I have been doing some research, Lily said after some silence. I have been doing some research on the protection I created for you through my sacrifice, Lily elaborated. Really? Did you find a way to fix the protection? Harry asked excitedly. He knew that Albus Dumbledore had ruined her protection, but his mom didn't know how to fix the protection, so as soon as his mom told him that she was researching the protection, he became excited thinking that she found a way to fix it. Even after killing the Dursleys, the protection never returned to its original state. No. I don't think that the protection could ever be fixed, Lily said sullenly. She has long accepted the fact that the protection couldn't be fixed anymore, but still thinking about it makes her feel heartbroken. Anger and rage bubbled inside her mind as she vowed to make Albus Dumbledore regret his decisions. I was wondering if I could modify the protection to give you some sort of danger sense, Lily explained, and Harry couldn't help but frown at her words. I already have danger sense, Harry pointed it out. His own danger sense, the one he acquired after sacrificing an Easel, is still working fine and even his wand could alert him. I know, but I was thinking if I could modify the protection to give you some sort of clairvoyance, Lily elaborated excitedly, making his eyes grow wide in surprise. Moments later, a bewildered look appeared on his face. Really? You can do that? But won't I lose the protection against Voldemort? Harry asked in a confused tone. Yes, it is possible, and yes, you will lose the protection you have against Voldemort, but you will gain much more. Still, I won't do anything if you don't want me to, Lily answered all of his questions. She was also hesitating for the same reason. If she modified the protection, then Harry would lose protection against Voldemort. No. No. I am completely alright with it if you want to change the protection. I would love to have clairvoyance, though clairvoyance isn't strictly future sight, right? Harry pointed out knowingly. You are right. Clairvoyance strictly doesn't mean future sight, but what I am planning to do will give you some sort of future sight along with some sort of scrying ability, Lily explained smugly. Though I am not planning to modify the protection until Voldemort is permanently dealt with. The protection might come in handy in a fight against him, Lily added thoughtfully, and Harry nodded his head in understanding. I am simply doing some research to keep myself busy, Lily trailed off, and once again Harry started to feel bad for his mom. There wasn't much she could do while being trapped inside his mind. Harry clenched his fists tightly. He vowed to make her a body as soon as possible. After finishing his shower, he quickly got dressed in a fresh pair of clothes and decided to wait for Jacqueline. It was only 8 AM right now, so he still might have some time before she arrived. With that in his mind, he started to head toward his desk to get a book, but he froze and turned toward the door. Apparently, he was wrong and Jacqueline was already here. Chapter 54, The Fun They Had, 3. Harry looked around at the people walking around him while chatting among themselves with a grimace on his face. Now that I am finally here, I have realized that I might have made a mistake. Harry pointed out slowly while looking around, making Jacqueline chuckle in amusement. There is no need to worry. Even I don't know how to speak Spanish, but almost all the shopkeepers can speak English, and even if someone can't speak Spanish, they can understand English without any issues, Jacqueline explained as she led Harry down the street. That's good, Harry admitted while nodding his head. It would have been a huge pain if none of the shopkeepers could understand him. Yeah, I was also worried about that when I came here, but this is probably the busiest magical marketplace in the world. Wizards and witches from all over the world come here to buy stuff. So, most of the shopkeepers can speak in more than 20 languages, Jacqueline explained with a chuckle. Harry couldn't help but gape at the number. That is quite impressive, Harry admitted with a hint of respect in his voice. He could only speak English and the shopkeepers here could speak more than 20. If that wasn't impressive, then he didn't know what was. You said people come here from all over the world to buy stuff, why? Harry asked curiously. There are a lot of stuff which are completely legal in Spain but are illegal in other parts of the world. For example, here you can buy Nunda's breath or even dragon eggs without any kind of restrictions, and you already know that the unforgivables are completely legal in Spain, so you can acquire a book on the said subject from any of the bookshops here, Jacqueline explained as she pointed at the bookshops dismissively. Not only that, but a lot of other branches of magic which are illegal in other parts of the world are completely legal in Spain, Jacqueline added as the two of them continued to walk down the streets. Harry nodded his head absent-mindedly as he started to wonder what else he could buy from here. Well, here we are all of a sudden, Jacqueline called out as she stopped in front of a shop with a wooden front. Harry inspected the shop and turned toward Jacqueline with a questioning look on his face. This is an apothecary, right? Harry asked, only for Jacqueline to snort in amusement. Yes, but it is much more than that. Let's go inside, Jacqueline declared before she grabbed him by his arm and started to tug him inside the shop. Harry wanted to protest, but before he could say anything, he was already inside the shop. After entering the shop, Jacqueline quickly made her way toward the counter, which was being manned by a middle-aged man. How can I help the two of you? The middle-aged man asked with a pleasant smile on his face. I want to buy some flesh-eating slugs along with some man-eating Venus flytraps and 2 full sets of werewolf organs. Jacqueline recited her shopping list. Harry, who was checking out the wares in the shop, whipped his head around to stare at Jacqueline in complete surprise. The man manning the counter didn't show any outward reaction and simply continued to smile. How many? The man asked as pulled out a notebook and a quill from his leather apron. 50 man-eating slugs and the same for man-eating Venus flytraps, Jacqueline answered after thinking for a bit. The man quickly wrote down something on his notepad and started to leave, but all of a sudden he stopped and turned around. Typical man-eating Venus flytraps or the bear traps one? The man asked with raised brows. The bear trap ones please, Jacqueline answered the man with a gentle smile on her face. All right. Wait here, the man said as he walked away from the counter. The man disappeared into the back of the shop. Werewolf organs, what the hell, Jackie? Harry hissed furiously, his words barely understandable. Jacqueline started to scratch her cheek with a sheepish look on her face. Well, you already know that I was planning to move out from the manor for quite some time, and I was finally able to convince my dad. He bought me a house only a few days ago, but I wanted to surprise you so I didn't tell you. Jacqueline chuckled sheepishly. Now that I think about it, I ruined my own surprise, Jacqueline added sullenly as she remembered that she was the one who dragged Harry inside the shop and she was also the one who invited him to tag along with her. She should have planned this trip better. Harry simply stared at the older girl in front of him in complete bewilderment. She blabbed some random stuff, but she clearly didn't answer his question. Daniel Harper buying her a house was definitely a surprise, but he still didn't know why she was buying werewolf organs. Harry finally regained his bearings after a few moments of silence. That's a surprise. I mean, who? I wasn't expecting him to buy you a house. Harry shook his head in surprise. But that isn't what I was asking, Harry pointed out, and Jacqueline finally realized what Harry was trying to say. Oh, Jacqueline mumbled as a look of realization dawned on her face. I am going to use them as fertilizers for the man-eating Venus flytraps. I am going to use the man-eating slugs and Venus flytraps as additional security, Jacqueline explained, and Harry finally nodded his head in understanding. To be honest, he didn't care much for the werewolves. Harry has heard everything about Remus Lupin from his mom, but neither of them cared much for the man since the man disappeared after the war and Lily was still angry at him for never trying to look for Harry. You won't be placing wards around your house? Harry asked curiously. Of course, I will be placing wards around my house, but wards can be brought down. Grindelwald did that more than enough times during the Wizarding World War to get the point across. The man-eating slugs and the man-eating Venus flytraps are going to be additional security, Jacqueline explained, and after some pondering, Harry nodded his head in understanding. So, is there anything in this shop that might be useful for me? Harry asked curiously as he once again started to inspect the wares, but most of the stuff inside the shop were cursed artifacts. He didn't have any use for cursed artifacts. Let me think, Jacqueline muttered thoughtfully as she started to rub her chin. Then all of a sudden she snapped her fingers and an excited look appeared on her face. I know the perfect item for you, Jacqueline admitted smugly. Really? Harry asked unsurely as he inclined his head. Yes. Jacqueline beamed proudly. Tell me, kiddo, do you want to fix your eyes? Jacqueline asked in a smug tone, though she already knew the answer. She knew that Harry was blind as a bat without his glasses. To be honest, she kind of forgot about the potion, or she would have gifted him the potion long ago. Really? I haven't heard about anything like that, and believe me, I have looked, Harry asked skeptically. He was quite aware of his weakness, so he has been looking for a solution for quite some time, but he was yet to find any. Now, Jacqueline was saying that there was a way to fix his eyes. Obviously, he was skeptical even though he knew that she would never lie to him about something like this. You haven't heard about it before because the potion is very illegal. Jacqueline emphasized on the very illegal part. I don't know much about the potion, but one of my friends had used it back in my 5th year, and believe me, she was also as blind as you without her glasses. She had told me that the potion was made after harvesting optic nerves from human eyes, Jacqueline explained with a shrug. Meanwhile, Harry, who was raptly listening to her words, turned a bit green when he heard that the potion was made from the optic nerves harvested from actual human eyes. He started to wonder if he should go for it or not, but thankfully, before he could get lost in his mental dilemma, his mom came to his rescue. Hadrian, you must use this potion. Your eyes are a weakness and your enemies won't hesitate to exploit any of your weaknesses, Lily explained firmly. Harry still seemed to hesitate a bit, so Lily decided to press on. So what if they are made from harvested human eyes? Fixing your eyesight might save your life someday, so the potion is worth it, Lily added seriously. Harry knew that his mom would have probably sacrificed a human if it meant fixing his eyes. After pondering for a few seconds more, Harry finally agreed to use this potion to fix his eyes. He realized that he was looking at the situation from a completely wrong angle. He wasn't the one who was doing the actual harvesting, and if this was enough to scare him off from his chosen path, then he simply wasn't determined enough. Okay. I will buy one, Harry admitted while nodding his head, and Jacqueline beamed at him proudly and started to pat his back. He could already guess that the potion wasn't going to be cheap, and the way he was spending his gold, it seemed that he needed to plan another diamond hunting trip pretty soon. Chapter 55, the headlines they read. Jacqueline's pad, July 13, 1994. It has been 2 days since Harry and Jacqueline returned from Spain after finishing their shopping trip, and Harry ended up buying a lot of stuff from Spain even though he was expecting to go on a shopping spree. He had to pay 250 galleons for the eye-fixing potion, which would have made him cry in blood if the results weren't worth it. Flashback starts. I think it will be better if I am here when you take the potion. My friend told me that her experience was rather painful, Jacqueline added after a small pause. As expected, Harry was quite excited about the potion. He wanted to fix his eyes as soon as possible even though he was somewhat disturbed by the potion at the beginning. Jacqueline also knew that he was excited about the potion, so she decided to follow him back to his apartment. According to Jacqueline, he will be experiencing a lot of pain after drinking the potion, but he wasn't a stranger to pain. Okay. Let me get changed and you can ask Norton to make something for you while you wait, Harry agreed with her since he didn't mind her presence. Sure, Jacqueline said with a grin as she plopped down on one of the chairs. Meanwhile, Harry simply grabbed some casual clothes from his wardrobe and entered the bathroom to get changed. After a couple of minutes, Harry walked out of the bathroom only to find Jacqueline sipping coffee with a pleased look on her face. Harry grabbed the potion vial and sat down on the floor. He uncorked the potion vial and grimaced at the horrible stench. Harry couldn't handle the stench and pinched his nose with his other hand. Here goes nothing, Harry declared with a disgusted look on his face and downed the potion in one go. The taste was so horrible that he barely held himself back from puking out his guts. Potions are always horrible, but this potion was probably the most horrible potion he ever took. Thankfully, he wouldn't need to drink this potion ever again. For the next few seconds, nothing happened and Harry was about to open his mouth to call it a dud, but that is when the potion kicked in. He accidentally bit his tongue when his eyes started to burn. He felt like his eyes were melting and he wouldn't be surprised if he was already bleeding from his eyes. He was in so much pain that he started to scream at the top of his lungs, but he didn't even notice. His mind finally started to blank out. He also wanted to pass out to escape the pain, but at the same time, he couldn't pass out due to the pain. Harry didn't know how much time had passed, but the pain finally started to subside, leaving a stinging pain in his eyes. He coughed and started to open his eyes and immediately snapped his eyes closed as the stinging pain intensified when the light entered his eyes. He hissed in pain as once again he tried to open his eyes, but this time, he was being slow and careful. Harry opened his eyes and noticed that everything was blurry. He could barely see anything even with his glasses, but his vision was slowly getting clear. "You better take off those glasses or you might go blind once again." He heard Jacqueline's voice, but he noticed that there was a weird raspiness in her voice. He still listened to her advice and took off his glasses. His vision continued to improve and the stinging pain he was feeling in his eyes finally started to disappear. I can see. I can finally see without my glasses, Harry mumbled in awe as he looked around. His vision was finally crystal clear and he realized that he couldn't see this well even with his new glasses. He looked around his room in complete awe. He felt like he was seeing the world for the first time. He slowly turned toward Jacqueline to thank her, but he started to frown when he noticed her scrunching her face in disgust. That's fucking gross, kiddo. Go and wash your face. I will clean the floor, Jacqueline huffed, looking a bit green, and Harry finally looked down to see that apparently, he was bleeding on the floor. He touched his face and realized that his suspicion was right. He had been bleeding from his eyes. Thanks, Jackie, I will be back in a second, Harry declared as he walked away to wash the blood on his body. Harry arrived inside the bathroom and stared at himself in the mirror. His eyes seemed to be much brighter than before and Jacqueline was also right. He was looking gross. He turned on the water and started to wash his face. Your eyes are more radiant than before. I like them, Lily breathed out slowly, making Harry freeze for a second. There was just something in her voice, but Harry couldn't place his finger on it. Thanks, Mom, Harry mumbled a thanks in a low tone as he finally finished washing his face. He wiped his face with the towel and nodded his head in satisfaction. Yes, he looked much better without his glasses. He pulled out his wand and flicked it in front of his shirt and the blood stains on his shirt disappeared. By the time Harry finally walked out of the bathroom, the floor was completely clean, thanks to Jacqueline. How are you feeling, kiddo? Jacqueline asked with a smug grin on her face, but instead of answering her question, he simply pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. After some time, Harry finally released her from his arms and stared at her gratefully. Thank you, Jackie. This means a lot to me, Harry said in a grateful tone while staring straight into Jacqueline's eyes. Jacqueline beamed at him and ruffled his hair. You don't have to thank me. You didn't even let me pay for the potion, so you don't have to thank me for anything, Jacqueline said as she lowered her hand to pat his shoulder. So, how are you feeling? Your reaction is enough for me to know that the potion worked, Jacqueline asked curiously. I feel great. I feel like I am seeing everything for the first time. My vision wasn't this clear even with my glasses, Harry answered with a grin. He was already loving his repaired vision. Well, that's good. So, do you want to see my house? Jacqueline asked, and after thinking for a bit, Harry agreed with her offer even though he wanted to dive straight into the books he bought from Spain. Flashback ends. Since then, he has been staying over in Jacqueline's new house and helping her around the house. He also brought along Norton so he could extend his help to Morsi, who was Jacqueline's house elf. Norton and Morsi have been working around the house, moving the furniture while Harry and Jacqueline have been training most of the time. Even the lack of wards didn't bother the duo since there was nobody around them. Yes, Jacqueline's new house was right in the middle of nowhere. Thankfully, her house was already connected to the Flow network. So, is there a reason you are studying soul magic? Jacqueline asked with a hiss as she applied some burn salve on her right calf. Harry got her good with the flame whip. This is something I found interesting so I decided to grab it. Harry answered dismissively. He saw a set of books dedicated to soul magic back in one of the bookshops in Spain and decided to buy the whole thing. There were mainly two reasons why Harry decided to buy the books. First of all, he wanted to build a new body for his mom, who was currently trapped inside his scar or somewhere else on his body in the soul form, and since he needed to transfer her soul into the new body, he needed to learn everything he could about soul magic. Secondly, Voldemort was still out there somewhere and his mom believed that he had used some sort of soul magic to survive. Oh well, as long as you are happy. Jacqueline shrugged and went back to what she had been doing. By the way, when are you going to place the wards? Harry asked curiously without looking away from his book. I don't know. I have ordered a ward stone, but it is yet to arrive, but the goblins assured me that they are trying their best and the ward stone will arrive within this week, Jacqueline answered sourly after thinking for a bit. Greedy little fuckers. Jacqueline cursed in exasperation. You contracted the goblins? Harry asked as he finally turned away from his book to look at Jacqueline. Yes, they might be greedy little fuckers, but they are the best in business, Jacqueline admitted grudgingly. Harry opened his mouth to ask how much the goblins were asking for the wards, but before he could speak up, the flow flared up and Brittany's face appeared in the fireplace. Harry! Harry! Are you there? Brittany called out frantically and Harry immediately closed his book and shot up from his chair. He placed the book on the chair and rushed toward the flue. Something serious must have happened or Brittany wouldn't be acting so frantic. Yeah, I am here. What happened? Harry asked as he stopped in front of Flue. Harry, you need to see this, Brittany said, and her face disappeared from the fireplace. Harry started to wonder what could be so urgent that she didn't even bother to warn him to step back. He stepped back and moments later, the flue flared up and Brittany walked out of the flue with an edition of the New York Ghost. She didn't even bother to say anything and simply handed him the paper. Harry raised his eyebrows in question, but he still accepted the paper. What happened? Jacqueline asked curiously as she stepped behind Harry so that she could also read the paper. Harry opened the paper and he immediately froze in shock and surprise as soon as he read the headlines. Peter Pettigrew escapes. Conspiracy or incompetence? Harry slowly closed his eyes and opened them after taking a deep breath, but the headlines were still there, glaring at him. He realized that he was going to have an extremely long and tiring day right in front of him. Motherfucker, Lily didn't even notice as the curse left her mouth. Phew. Jacqueline hissed as she also read the headlines from the back. Yeah. Fuck indeed, Harry mumbled absent-mindedly as continued to stare at the headlines. Either Lily was so lost that she didn't hear him curse or she simply decided to ignore it thanks to the situation. Chapter 56, The Conspiracies Discovered, 3. Director's Office, DMLE, July 13, 1994. Amelia Bones rubbed her temples with a frustrated look on her face. She wasn't having a good day. Fuck that. She wasn't having a good week. First, she found that Peter Pettigrew was still alive and the man was branded with the dark mark, which probably meant that Sirius Black was innocent. Thanks to that, her paperwork increased. Then she went and discovered that the boy who lived was already a murderer, and Albus Dumbledore was back to his usual games. That wasn't the last of it, she even discovered that you-know-who was still alive and kicking. That wasn't the end of her miseries. Somehow Peter Pettigrew was able to escape while he was being transported to Azkaban. Obviously, Fudge decided to place the blame on her and her department while he tried to sweep the whole thing under the rug, not wanting the public to panic. While Amelia wasn't happy with him blaming her and her department, she agreed that public outcry was the last thing they needed right now. Everything was already a mess, so it wasn't a surprise that she wanted to avoid public panic. Then that bitch Skeeter had to go and splash Pettigrew's escape and her department's failure on the first page. Amelia was planning to do some extremely painful things to that bitch. Obviously, Fudge blew the gasket when the news finally came out, and once again, he blamed her department for the leak and Amelia had to agree. There was a leak in her department. Someone obviously talked and if Amelia ever got her hands on that person, then that person was going to pay. Her only saving grace was the fact that none of the Aurors guarding Pettigrew during the transport were killed or she would have been thrown out of the office by her ears. Amelia grabbed the bottle of fire whiskey and started to chug straight from the bottle. After drinking almost a quarter of the bottle, she finally stopped with a gasp. Moments later, she burped and released a stream of flames from her mouth. Amelia wanted to laugh at her own misery. If she kept going at this rate then she wouldn't be surprised if she became an alcoholic. That was always an option if her 14-year-old niece wasn't depending on her. Amelia kept staring at the fire whiskey bottle with a complicated look on her face and she almost jumped from her chair when someone knocked on the door, surprising her. Yes. Amelia called out as she quickly hid the fire whiskey bottle. She was still on duty and her arse was already on fire with the Pettigrew fiasco and she wanted to avoid anything else piling on her plate. The door clicked open and Rufus, followed by Alastair, entered her office. Amelia was really looking forward to some answers. You don't look so good, Amelia, Rufus pointed out and Amelia practically rolled her eyes at him in exasperation. Sorry. Sorry. Stupid question, Rufus added drily. So, did either of you find anything? Amelia asked when the two of them finally sat down. Alastair sniffed loudly and took a small sip from his hip flask. It was an inside job. Someone helped him escape and whoever it was, they are quite high up in our system or they have connections with someone high in the place, Alastair answered with a huff. Pettigrew's wand is also gone, Rufus added unhappily. Amelia stared at the duo for the next few seconds in complete silence. Fuck. Motherfucking stupid rat fucker. Amelia cursed loudly as she slammed her hands on her armrests. Rufus and Alastair cringed as Amelia continued to curse like a sailor. The whole scene continued for almost a minute before Amelia finally started to calm down. She closed her eyes and started to take deep breaths to get her temper in control. Is there anything else you can tell me? Amelia asked in a defeated tone. She wasn't expecting to make any breakthroughs from snippets of information, but it was still better to have all the information in her hands. Yes, someone sabotaged the anti-animagus runes placed on Pettigrew's shackles. That is how the bastard escaped, Alastair explained blandly. He was also unhappy with the whole incident and how it was being handled. He wanted to blame Amelia, but he knew that it wasn't her fault. She was doing her best to handle the situation. I see. Amelia mumbled as she leaned back in her chair and started to contemplate. Rufus, you are dismissed, Amelia called out after a whole minute of silence. The man gave her a respectful nod before getting up and leaving the room. As soon as the man was gone, Alastair stood up and started to inspect the room with his wand. When he was finally satisfied with his inspection, he returned to his seat. Amelia, I think Albus is the one who helped Pettigrew escape, Alastair whispered in a low tone as he leaned forward. Amelia opened her eyes and nodded her head. I was also thinking the same. His escape was clean, too clean, Amelia agreed. His wand went missing and nobody noticed. There are a lot of people who could have done it, but there is only one man who won't be suspected by anyone, Amelia added with a scowl. He would also know how to sabotage the anti-animagus runes on the shackles. Alastair added venomously while nodding his head. I think that the whiskered fool wants Voldemort to return, Alastair added with a hint of fear in his voice. Even Alastair was afraid of the man and Amelia could understand why he was afraid. She was afraid too. I also heard some weird rumors. Alastair added unsurely after a minute of silence. Amelia simply urged him to continue. I heard that they are planning to bring back the Triwizard Tournament. Apparently, Crouch wants to go out with a bang, Alastair snarked unhappily. The man's reputation took a huge hit after Black's trial. And Bagman is helping him, Alastair added with a scowl. Amelia scowled, but soon a look of realization struck her face. The Goblet of Fire forms unbreakable contracts with anyone who is selected. Amelia wondered aloud. She didn't know much about the Triwizard Tournament, but she had read a few things about the Goblet of Fire, as the Goblet of Fire is still considered one of the most prestigious artifacts to be owned by the British Ministry of Magic. When Amelia noticed the look of confusion on Alastair's face, she decided to elaborate. If someone places Harry Potter's name inside the goblet, then he would need to participate if he doesn't want to lose his magic, Amelia asked, and a look of realization dawned on Alastair's face. The boy would be forced to participate. Alastair mumbled in horror. Albus is trying to use the goblet to bring the boy back to Britain, Alastair concluded sourly. For the next few minutes, the two of them didn't say anything else and simply decided to contemplate in complete silence. Alastair, I want you to meet the boy. Take your protégé if you want, but I want you to meet the boy. Get a feel. We know that he can already commit murders in cold blood, but I need to know more. Amelia finally broke the silence. All right. I will be heading out tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, Alastair also agreed with her. They didn't know the contents of the prophecy, but according to Saul, the prophecy probably entailed that only Harry Potter could slay Voldemort or something along those lines. It would be bad if the boy turned out to be another Voldemort, and if that was the case then they needed to prepare so that they could deal with him. Alastair slowly stood up and left Amelia's office while waving at her. 4th floor, St. Mungo's Hospital, July 13, 1994. Hello, my boy, Albus greeted Sirius as he sat down beside his bed. How are you? Albus asked softly. Sirius stared at the man for some time. He was still angry at Albus. If Albus hadn't asked for leniency then that rat bastard would have been dead. I am getting better, he answered after a few moments of silence. I am sorry, my boy, for what you have to go through, Albus apologized while looking down at his hands. If only I could have captured him earlier, Albus' voice trembled. It's all right. You at least caught him and got me a trial even though that bastard is out in the wind, Sirius growled as he clutched his hands in anger. For the next couple of minutes, neither of them said anything and it was Sirius who broke the silence. I want to meet my godson, Sirius said firmly while staring at Albus. Albus looked away. There might be a problem with that. Albus trailed off and started to explain how Harry ran away from his house due to the abuse he went through. Minerva and Alastair already knew about the abuse, so there was no reason to hide it, but he didn't tell Sirius about the murders. Sirius had spent almost 1.5 decades in Azkaban, so there might be a chance that Sirius might try to justify Harry's actions. In that case, he will lose Sirius' support, and for his plan to work, he couldn't have that. Sirius was obviously angry at him, but he knew that it would pass. Then it is your fault that he ran away. It's your fault that he had to suffer so much. Sirius screamed at Albus, and Albus simply nodded his head in agreement with a shameful look on his face. I know I failed him. Albus admitted sullenly. That is why I never tried to reach out to him. If he is happy in that country, then I am fine with it. At least, he won't have to deal with the pure-blood propaganda in America, Albus admitted slowly with a heartbroken look on his face. Sirius, as the supreme mugwump, I will help you with all of my power, but I won't interfere in his life directly, Albus committed firmly, making Sirius stare at him in complete surprise. Sirius wanted to scream at the man. It was his fault that Harry didn't have a happy childhood, but how could he be angry at the man when he looked so tired and defeated? He looked down at his lap as he was barely holding himself back from breaking down. Sirius, there is something else I want you to know. Voldemort is alive. After a few minutes of silence, Albus finally started to tell him about the prophecy. Giving all this information to Sirius was a risk. The man was reckless, but he needed to bring the man into his fold. Well, not completely, but he still needed the man's support. Chapter 57, The Conspiracies Discovered, 4. Headmaster's Office, Hogwarts, July 13, 1994. Albus returned to his office after meeting Sirius only a few minutes ago and decided to stand in front of the window with a morose look on his face. He was so disgusted at himself that he started to wonder if he could ever look into his mother's or sister's eyes after meeting them in his next great adventure. He was feeling so shameful that for a moment he considered giving up and running away. Alas, it was only his wishful thinking. He knew he simply couldn't give up and leave. His conscience would never allow him to go down that road. If he gave up, then Voldemort and his followers would win. He couldn't let that happen. So many innocents would lose their lives and he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he simply rolled over and allowed that to happen. It was a heavy burden, but he knew that he was the only one who could shoulder this burden. He could never trust anyone else with such a heavy burden. Albus sullenly shook his head as he turned around before making his way toward his chair. His mother and sister would understand. After all, everything he was doing was for the greater good. Albus grabbed a lemon drop from his bowl and popped one in his mouth as he started to review his plans. Everything was progressing according to his plans. While he would have preferred if Pettigrew's escape was kept under wraps, it wasn't going to hinder his plans much. Though he couldn't help but wonder how Rita Skeeter was able to learn the truth. He stroked his beard as he started to contemplate. Her knack for digging out secrets along with her venomous quill was a really dangerous combination. A quill is mightier than a wand, Albus mused internally as he started to devise some plans to deal with Rita Skeeter, or at least, defang her. Anyway, it wasn't going to matter in the long run. After all, as soon as Voldemort revealed himself to the rest of the world, everyone would be looking up to him to defeat Voldemort. Yes, some would be looking toward Harry to defeat the man, but anyone with a lick of common sense would be looking up to him to defeat Voldemort. So, even if Rita wrote something to ruin his image, it won't matter in the long run. Back to the topic at hand, helping Peter escape wasn't that hard. Retrieving Peter's wand was an extremely easy task for him, especially with his chief warlock position, and knocking out the guards during the transport was also quite easy. The hardest part was when he had to return some of the memories to Peter so that he could successfully locate Voldemort and help in his resurrection. Thankfully, Peter decided not to kill any of the Aurors after he left. It would have been a useless loss of lives and Albus abhorred killing. Additionally, if Peter had killed any of them, then the DMLE would have chased him to the end of the world, which would have ruined all of his plans. Thankfully, Peter knew how to be low profile. Albus leaned back in his chair and released a tired sigh as he closed his eyes. Everything was already in motion, now he simply needed to wait for the rest of the dominoes to fall. Harry's apartment, July 13, 1994. After reading the headlines, Harry decided to return to his apartment, saying that he needed some space. Jacqueline and Brittany understood where he was coming from and neither of them tried to tag along, but they did tell him that they would be there if he needed them. After that, Jacqueline dropped him outside his apartment building before apparating away. Jacqueline had agreed to teach him apparition and how to create portkeys, but Jacqueline wanted to wait until wards were placed around her house before she started to teach him. Unfortunately, Harry's apartment was also not connected to the Floo network. Hence Jacqueline was the only option if he wanted to return to his apartment. He could have used her Floo to travel to any of the nearby shops, but Jacqueline Express was simply way more faster. "What do you think, Mom?" Harry asked as he leaned back in his chair. He finally finished reading all the articles related to Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew. "Albus is up to something," Lily answered after some pondering. I believe he is going to try to use Sirius to take you back to Britain, Lily added thoughtfully. You never told me about Sirius. What is he like? Harry asked curiously. He had heard a few things about the man from his mom here and there, but there was still a lot he needed to know since the man was going to try to take him back to Britain. He was a Gryffindor, brave and foolish. He was a reckless fool and he was extremely vicious toward anyone he hated. Lily paused when she remembered how the man bullied Severus, not that it mattered anymore. She no longer cared for any of them. He was like a brother to your father. Most of the time, he was being mischievous, but he was also a bully. Lily continued to tell Harry about Sirius. He was a black, but he was the black sheep of his family. A white sheep would be the correct term considering everything about the blacks. Lily chuckled in amusement. Though he was quite good in defense, Lily added thoughtfully. Oh. And he was a man-whore. Can't forget that, Lily added mischievously, making Harry choke. Harry coughed a couple of times before he finally started to calm down. Really? How is that relevant information? Harry asked with a scowl and Lily simply clicked her tongue. TCH. 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 You still have a lot to learn, my son. Sirius is a horn dog. Women are one of his weaknesses. If a woman bared herself in front of him, then he will forget everything and start thinking with his other head, Lily explained with a hint of amusement in her voice. She was having a lot of fun making Harry uncomfortable. For the next minute, Harry didn't say anything else. Yes, at first the topic made him somewhat uncomfortable as he didn't want to know anything about his godfather's sexual escapades, but he quickly got over it. He quickly realized how that piece of information could be useful for him. It was a weakness and all weaknesses could be exploited. It also told him a lot about the man's character. I see, Harry muttered as he nodded his head in understanding. Though he may not be the same man I knew. I am truly surprised that he is still sane after spending 13 years in that hellhole. Most inmates go insane after spending only a couple of years in Azkaban, Lily pondered thoughtfully. Even though he is sane, I don't expect him to be the same man, Lily added after a small pause. So, is there a chance that he is still one of Dumbledore's yes men? Harry asked after a minute of complete silence. If it was Lupin then I would have said yes, but I can't be sure about Sirius. Before that Halloween night, I would have said yes, but now, after spending nearly a decade and a half in a hellhole like Azkaban? I don't know, Lily answered while shaking her head. Then I will wait until I meet him. I just hope that he isn't one of Dumbledore's yes men. Harry released a tired sigh. He was somewhat excited to meet his godfather, but if his godfather was in Dumbledore's pocket, then he would simply wash his hands with the man. Lily also knew that Harry was excited to meet his godfather, but she didn't try to dissuade him. Lily couldn't blame him for not being there, especially when he was thrown into a hellhole like Azkaban. She had already decided to give him a chance, but if it was Lupin, then it would have been a completely different matter. There was no way that she was ever going to give Lupin another chance. That man not only failed her, James, and Sirius, but he also failed her Hadrian, and the last was an unforgivable crime in her eyes. So, what now? Lily asked, finally breaking the silence. We plan. He will be able to claim guardianship over me without any contest, so if he wants me back in Britain, then I would have to return, Harry said as he rubbed his chin. Is there a way we can contest his claims? Harry asked with a frown. He didn't want to return to Britain, at least, not yet. He did have a copy of our wills and if he presents it then there will be no contesting anything. After all, we named him your godfather and we also named him your primary guardian in case we aren't there, Lily stated firmly. Though you could claim that he lost his mind after spending 13 years in Azkaban, but it may not work, Lily added thoughtfully after a small pause. All right, Harry said while nodding his head. He could either fight his godfather by claiming that he is no longer sane and still lose the case, as his godfather could simply present a clear bill from a mind healer, or he could ask for a mind healer checkup and he would lose the case, or he could at least wait to meet the man before deciding anything. The former route might ruin his impression in front of his godfather, so the latter route was probably the safest bet for him. Harry clutched his hands tightly with a determined look on his face. The noose around his neck was tightening as his enemies had already started to make their moves. He decided to wrap up his affairs as much as he could before the eventual meeting. Chapter 58, The Meeting Unscheduled, I. Alley of Druids, New York, July 15, 1994. Alastair Moody landed on his feet as the porte-cochere dropped him at the entrance of the Alley of the Druids, but unfortunately, his companion's landing wasn't that graceful. Nymphadora Tonks, Alastair Mad Eye Moody's protégé landed on her feet, but as soon as her feet touched the ground, she stumbled forward and ended up planting her face on the ground, drawing attention from the passers-by. Alastair's grimace turned into an unhappy scowl when he noticed that they had garnered unnecessary attention. He was already expecting some sort of ungraceful display from his protégé, but he wasn't expecting her to draw attention with her clumsiness. Alastair growled as stomped toward his protégé, who still had her face planted on the ground. "How long are you going to lie there?" Alastair asked unhappily as he arrived beside the lying figure. Sorry. I am getting up." The figure whined as she slowly started to push herself off the ground. "We need to get out of here, soon," Alastair said impatiently as he started to tap his good leg on the ground. "You could have at least asked if I was all right or not, Nymphadora. Don't call me that." Tonks gave him an irritated look while dusting off her leather jacket and jeans. "Your skin has become extremely thick to protect yourself from your own clumsiness," Alastair said drily as he turned around and started to walk away. "How could you say something so rude to a lady?" Tonks exclaimed and she hurried behind him. She didn't want to be left behind in foreign territory, where something bad might happen to her. After training under Moody, she had also become somewhat paranoid. "Lady? Please." Alastair snorted derisively and Tonks felt an invisible pierce her heart. "At best, you are a bull in a china shop," Alastair added unhappily and Tonks felt another invisible arrow pierce her heart. "Emotional damage." Tonks exclaimed inside her mind as she barely stopped herself from coughing up blood. "So, why are we here, Mad Eye? You never told me anything," Tonks asked curiously, changing the topic when she realized that she had already sustained a lot of emotional damage and she probably couldn't take any more. Alastair sniffed as he took a sip from his hip flask. "We are here to find the Potter boy. Amelia wants me to meet him and get a hang of his character," Alastair grunted and Tonks immediately brightened up. Tonks was only 7 when the war ended, so she also grew up reading Harry Potter books, so she became excited as soon as Moody revealed that they were going to meet Harry Potter. "Really? I've wanted to meet him since I was a child," Tonks gushed out excitedly. Alastair's head snapped toward Tonks and glared at her. "There is no need to be excited. If you are hoping to meet the Harry Potter from the storybooks, then you are going to be highly disappointed." Alastair barked and her shoulders slumped down after hearing his words. She was also aware of the fact that the real Harry Potter wasn't going to be anything like the Harry Potter from the storybooks. After all, 4-year-olds can't defeat dragons or slay dementors. Though the real Harry Potter might be more dangerous than the storybook one. Alastair trailed off, surprising Tonks. "What do you mean by that?" Tonks asked hurriedly. "Just a warning. Keep your guard around him," Alastair huffed as he didn't want to go into details while walking through crowded streets. Tonks couldn't help but frown after hearing his words, but she still nodded her head in understanding. "By the way, do you know where he lives?" Tonks asked while looking around, instead of watching her steps. It was a bad choice as moments later, she tripped and ended up stumbling forward, but fortunately, she was somehow able to balance herself before planting her face on the ground. Alastair growled and started to glare at her, making her chuckle nervously. "No, I do not know where he lives. That is why I need to meet my contact before anything else, and we would also need to avoid the Aurors. We aren't carrying wand permits," Alastair explained after shaking his head at her antics. "Wand permit?" Tonks asked with a confused look on her face. "Yes, wand permit. It's basically your license to carry a wand," Alastair answered grumpily, making Tonks freeze in surprise. She hurriedly looked around and caught up to Alastair, looking extremely nervous. "They aren't going to send us to some place of Azkaban equivalent if we are caught, right? I am only 19 and I am still single. I can't go to prison, Mad Eye. My mum wants to see me married and I don't want to disappoint her." Tonks started to babble nervously, making Alastair growl in anger. "Will you shut your trap?" Alastair barked, making her shut her mouth with a snap. "Stop drawing attention and follow me, you dunderhead, and for Merlin's sake, stop drawing attention." Alastair hissed furiously as balefully glared at Tonks, making her cringe back and gulp loudly. "Do you understand?" Alastair growled, making Tonks frantically nod her head like a little girl. "Good." Alastair snapped and turned around and started to walk away. "Bloody rookies," Tonks heard Alastair mumble as she followed him down the street with her shoulders slumped down. Time skip, a few hours later. "Mad Eye, you need to taste this. This is awesome." I don't understand why they don't sell all this stuff back in Britain, Tonks babbled on with a gleeful look on her face as she took a huge bite of her hamburger. Apparently, she fell in love with unhealthy American food. She hummed in satisfaction as she savored the taste before taking a large sip from her cola cup. Alastair stuffed some French fries inside his mouth as his eyebrow continued to twitch in irritation. Everything besides simple French fries could be hazardous in this country. The continued existence of the people in this country baffled him. Their unhealthy food should have driven them to early graves long ago, and what annoyed him more was the fact that his damn protégé was trying to entice him to an unhealthy lifestyle with mind-numbingly delicious-smelling food. If you eat all that junk then you might end up morbidly fat, Alastair commented drily as his eyes rolled over all the food Tonks had bought. Tonks simply threw him a dirty look before shrugging dismissively. Perks of being a metamorphomagus. I can eat this stuff for the rest of my life and still maintain my shape, Tonks revealed smugly as she continued to enjoy her hamburger and cola. Alastair would never admit it, but he did feel a bit jealous of her. Bah! Who cares? It's only food, no matter how mind-numbingly good it smells. Alastair complained inside his mind before looking away from his protégé. Do you really think Harry Potter lives here? I mean this place is so unassuming. I was expecting him to be living in a mansion or something else, Tonks asked as she started to unwrap a hot dog after finishing her hamburger. Alastair shrugged dismissively as he continued to eat his bland French fries. That's the information, lassie. Alastair gave her the shortest answer, not wanting to start a childish argument with her. All right, Tonks nodded her head in understanding. Though I can't believe I am observing the boy who lived without his consent. Wow! Now, I feel like a bloody creep, Tonks continued to babble unhelpfully, making Alastair's face twitch in irritation. Alastair didn't even bother to answer her question as he realized Tonks was bored and she would end up creating another sick theory from his answer. Fuck, Mad Eye! Your informant was right. There he is. Tonks hissed hurriedly as she jerked her head toward a black-haired boy, who was making his way toward the apartment building. Alastair had to admit, Tonks was right. At first, he didn't recognize the boy as the boy was not wearing any glasses and he didn't look anything like in the books. So, what now? Tonks asked as she hurriedly finished her hot dog. The two of them were watching the apartment building from the roof of a building on the other side of the street. The boy finally arrived in front of the apartment building and unlocked the door with a key. We wait and keep an eye on him. According to my informant, that's his apartment, Alastair said as he pointed his finger toward one of the apartments on the left. Wouldn't it be better if we made our move now? Tonks asked with a confused look on her face. Ideally I would have done that, but this is not an ideal situation. We aren't planning to grab him, we are only planning to meet him and get a hang of his character. If we alert the Aurors then we will be in a lot of trouble, Alastair explained gruffly. There are so many people walking around and one of them might decide to become a good Samaritan. Then we will have another heap of trouble on our lap, Alastair added unhappily. So, stealth and anonymity are our priority, right? Tonks asked as she started to unwrap another hamburger. Yes. Alastair sniffed as he took a small sip from his hip flask. Remember. Constant vigilance. Alastair barked loudly, making Tonks wince. Thankfully, the silencing charm was still active or everyone walking down the street would have been alerted of their presence. Chapter 59, The Meeting Unscheduled, 2. With Harry, July 15, 1994. Harry was making his way toward his apartment building and then all of a sudden his senses flared. It wasn't his danger sense. No, it was something different. He started to ponder as he kept walking toward his apartment building without stopping. He pulled out the key and started to open the door, and that is when he realized what was happening. He was being watched. He really wanted to look around to catch a glimpse of the perpetrator, but he forcefully held himself back from doing that. If he tried to look around then the people watching him would be alerted and he would also reveal the fact that he was aware of their presence. He unlocked the door and entered the building, and he immediately realized that he wasn't being watched anymore. He started to climb the stairs while pondering his situation. He was returning from Gringotts after exchanging some diamonds for a sum of 6,000 galleons. After learning of his godfather's freedom, Harry decided to make another trip to Diavik Diamond as he wasn't sure if he would get another chance or not. This time, he didn't have much time to prepare for the trip, so this time he decided to end his diamond hunting excursion after a day. Why was he being watched? Did anyone notice his latest diamond hunting trip? Was it Macusa? Was it Voldemort or the Death Eaters? Was it Dumbledore or one of his sycophants? Questions like that sprang inside his mind, but there were no answers. Harry couldn't help but grimace at his current situation. He could escape, but if he did that then he wouldn't be getting answers and the people watching him would realize that they were discovered. Additionally, the people watching him could always corner him on a later date and take him by surprise. Then he would also lose his apartment along with everything inside of it. He would be damned to let that happen. You made the right call, Lily said when Harry finally arrived in front of his apartment door. Harry nodded his head in understanding as he unlocked the door and entered his apartment. Once again his senses flared up and he knew that once again he was being watched. He barely held back a scowl or a frown from appearing on his face. The people watching him also knew about his apartment. He was really pissed off right now. He started to wonder if it was Lucas. He knew how to find Lucas and he would pay if it was who sold his information. Harry also realized that he was never clandestine about his residence and someone else could have easily found his apartment if they tried. He cursed his stupidity inside his mind, but he quickly regained his bearings. He couldn't change the past, so what's done is done. What are you going to do, Hadrian? Lily asked with a hint of worry in her voice. Just like her son, she was also worried. Her son wasn't ready to face either Voldemort or Dumbledore. I will be sending Norton to gather information. I need to know who is watching me before planning anything, Harry answered her after some pondering, and Lily had to admit it was a good plan. Then I set a trap from the people watching me as I need answers, Harry added after thinking for a bit. Is that wise? It would be a lot easier to escape, Lily asked as she wasn't able to hide her concern. While she was confident in her son's abilities, she was still worried about him. After all, her Hadrian was the most important thing to her in the entire world. Yes, I have already decided. I can't keep running away, I need to face my problems. I can't keep going around them, Harry answered in a determined tone, and even though Lily wasn't completely happy with his decision, she couldn't help but feel proud of her son. Since you have already made up your mind, I am not going to try to dissuade you anymore. I will help you in any way I can, even though there isn't much I can help you with, Lily said with a hint of sadness in her voice. She hated herself for not being there for her son. You being here with me is enough for me, Mom, Harry said softly when he noticed the sadness his mom was feeling through the connection. He started to focus his own emotions for her through the connection. Lily smiled bitterly when she felt him pouring his feelings through the connection. She realized that she wasn't doing him any favor by sulking, so she decided to focus on the pride she was feeling. Harry smiled softly as he felt his mom brighten up a bit. Now that his mom was no longer sulking in self-loathing, he stopped channeling his emotions through the connection and started to focus his senses toward the people watching him. Since he could notice their gaze, he realized that he could probably locate them, but it was easier said than done. With an indifferent look on his face, he made his way toward the wardrobe and after grabbing a fresh pair of casual clothes, he entered the bathroom to change. The feeling of being watched disappeared, which meant that the people watching him were probably somewhere on the opposite side of the street. He couldn't keep hiding inside the bathroom, so he quickly got changed and left the bathroom. Once again the feeling of being watched returned. He knew that he simply couldn't stand in the middle of the room as he would try to focus his senses on their location, so he decided to grab a book. He quickly made his way to his desk and after taking his seat, he grabbed a book from the pile. He opened the book, but instead of paying attention to the book he started to focus his senses, wanting to locate his watchers. After nearly half an hour, he finally decided to give up. He knew that they were hiding somewhere on the other side of the street, but he couldn't pinpoint their location. Harry realized that his magical sense might be quite useful, but it still had its limitations. With no other options, Harry finally decided to summon Norton. He knew that the people watching him couldn't hear him thanks to the wards, but they might be able to read his lips. So, Harry decided to play it safe and turn in the opposite direction while talking with Norton. The kitchen was on the other side of the apartment, so the kitchen was probably another part of his apartment where his watchers couldn't keep an eye on him. Norton, Harry called out and Norton arrived in front of him with a soft pop. Norton, we are being watched. Don't react or act alarmed or they will realize that the jig is up, Harry warned Norton before the overly excited house elf could gasp in horror and start looking around. Though Norton did lose all of his excitement and nodded his head in understanding. All right. Harry nodded his head as he started to hope that Norton's shift in emotion wasn't enough to alert his watchers. They are hiding somewhere on the other side of the street. I don't know their exact location, but my guess is that they are probably on the roof. I want you to go and find them and gather all the information you could, Harry said, and Norton nodded his head with a determined look on his face. Norton's tennis ball-sized eyes started to burn with fiery determination. Don't worry, Master Hadrian, Norton won't disappoint you," Norton claimed proudly. "I know, and Norton, be extra sneaky," Harry added before Norton could disappear to carry out his task. "Of course, Master Hadrian, Norton will be extra sneaky," Norton said while frantically nodding his head before disappearing with a soft pop. Now there was only one thing Harry could do, and that was wait. He could only wait for Norton's return. Almost half an hour had passed since Norton left, and since there was nothing Harry could do for the time being, he simply decided to read the book to pass his time. He hoped that the feeling of being watched might disappear if he ignored it enough, but it wasn't that lucky. The feeling was getting on his nerves, but there wasn't much he could do since the feeling refused to go away. Harry was finally brought out of his musings when he heard a soft pop behind him. He quickly turned around only to find Norton. "Master Hadrian," Norton found them. "There are 2 of them and they are hiding on the roof of the grey-colored building." Norton was being extra sneaky just like Master Hadrian wanted, so they didn't notice Norton. Norton explained in a low tone, worried that someone besides his master might hear him. "Did you hear what they were talking about?" Harry asked with a hint of excitement in his voice. If he could learn their motive, then he could start planning how to deal with them. Norton's ears dropped after hearing his question. Norton couldn't hear anything, Master Hadrian, and since Norton was being sneaky, he couldn't get close to them, Norton said, feeling like he had failed his master. "It's all right," Harry quickly dismissed his imagined failure as he realized that his watchers have probably cast a silencing charm around them. "Can you describe them?" Harry asked, and this time, Norton excitedly nodded his head. "One of them is a man and he looks ugly. His face is filled with scars and one of his eyes was fake and creepy," Norton explained and shivered as he remembered the creepy eye. "One of his legs is also fake," Norton added after a small pause. "The other one is a woman and her hair is like a rainbow. It keeps changing colors," Norton explained, making Harry incline his head before he started to rub his chin. "The man is probably Alastor Moody. The description matches his profile and he is one of Dumbledore's yes man," Lily gasped in horror and worry, making Harry scrunch his eyebrows in concern. "Tell me about him," Harry requested, and instead of answering him, Lily started to send him her memories through their connection, and the look of concern on Harry's face turned into a heavy frown before finally settling on a look of bitter scowl. Chapter 60, The Meeting Unscheduled, 3. Harry sat in complete silence contemplating his options. Thanks to his mom, he was able to learn a lot about this Alastor Moody. From the information he acquired from his mom, neither magical nor muggle traps would work against the man, as he would see right through them with the help of his magical eye. Direct confrontation was also out of option. According to his mom, Alastor Moody was the strongest combatant of the Order, only to be beaten by Albus Dumbledore, so the man would wipe the floor with him with extreme ease. Additionally, the man wasn't alone, his companion would also spring into action if a fight broke out. He could always try something underhanded to get an edge, but there was only a small chance that it would work. Alastor Moody wasn't a rookie and he wouldn't make a rookie mistake. If he was alone, then Harry could have at least tried something, but the same trick won't work a second time. He could have tried to use guns to get an advantage, but once again he wasn't sure if guns would work or not. After all, there was always a chance that Moody knew about guns and how to defend himself against guns. Moody is an extremely paranoid person, so there was a high chance that he already knew about guns since they were a threat to his life. According to his mom, Moody was probably sent by Dumbledore, and it would be foolish if he revealed all of his cards in front of Moody, who will surely be reporting back to Dumbledore. Running away wasn't an option from the start since he needed answers, and while he could always inform the Aurors, it came along with its own set of problems. Harry realized that he was out of options. There was nothing he could do to get rid of them without burning any bridges. "Norton," Harry called out as he arrived inside the kitchen. The feeling of being watched disappeared. "I want you to grab the ward stone and place it inside one of the expandable trunks along with all the new books I bought and some clothes," Harry explained, and the house elf nodded solemnly. The ward stone was probably the most important artifact he owned. He needed to take the ward stone with him at any cost, as without the ward stone, he would lose Norton, and it would be a huge blow if he lost Norton. Norton was not only one of his best friends, but he was also one of his most important assets. If it was up to Harry, then he would have long ago bound Norton to himself, but if he wanted to bind Norton to himself, then he would need to break his current bond, and only the Potter family head could break the existing bond between Norton and the ward stone. Even handing over clothes to Norton wouldn't work. So, he needed to wait until he could pick the mantle of Lord Potter himself if he wanted to bind Norton to himself. Until then, he needed to drag the ward stone along with him if he didn't want to lose Norton. I also need you to gather the rest of the trunks and keep them hidden since the fake-eyed man might be able to see through walls, Harry added as he didn't want to leave the rest of the books from the Potter library. His apartment was small, so almost the whole Potter library was still stored inside the trunks. I may also need your help to escape in case they tried to kidnap me, Harry added after thinking for a bit, and Norton nodded his head in understanding. Of course, Master Hadrian. Norton won't be disappointing, Master Hadrian, Norton said while bobbing his head with a determined look on his face. Oh. Don't call me Hadrian in front of them. Call me Harry, Harry added before walking out of the kitchen. Norton simply nodded his head while staring at Harry's back before he left to carry out the tasks. Harry was lying on his bed, trying to fall asleep, but no matter how much he tried, sleep refused to come to him, especially since he was still being watched. It was already long past midnight and Harry was starting to wonder if he should take a dreamless sleep potion to fall asleep. I was wondering if you should inform Jacqueline or Brittany, Lily wondered aloud as her voice rang out inside Harry's mind. No, I don't want her to drag either of them into this mess. It's better if they don't get involved, Harry quickly dismissed the idea. Brittany wasn't even 14 yet, it would be better if she never got involved in this mess, and involving Jacqueline so soon might reveal his hand and Harry couldn't have that. Albus Dumbledore and his sycophants were expecting to meet a boy who was about to start his 4th year of wizarding education and Harry wasn't planning to disappoint them. Then there was also the fact he didn't have any information about the whole situation. Then all of a sudden Harry's eyes snapped open when the feeling of being watched disappeared. Did they finally decide to leave? But, why now? Harry asked himself. Maybe they decided to take a break? It's long past midnight, Lily pointed out even though she didn't believe her own words. Harry quickly shook his head. No. I don't think that's the case. Harry shook his head as he started to ponder if he should get up or not. Moments later, he felt a tingle in the wards and he immediately shot up from the bed. They were here. They were probably probing the wards. He quickly climbed off the bed and started to get dressed, and as soon as he was dressed, he opened the wards for them. There wasn't anything else he could have done since he was planning to meet them in the place. Don't worry, Hadrian. I am going to be here with you, Lily tried to comfort her son and Harry simply nodded his head with a grateful look on his face. Moments later, someone knocked on the door, and instead of manually opening the door, he jabbed his wand at the door to open it. The door swung open, only to reveal 2 people standing on the other side of the door. The man standing at the front looked like his face was roughly carved from wood. His face was riddled with scars and a small chunk of his nose was also missing. On top of his head, there was a mop of dirty blonde grizzled hair, but his eyes were probably the most shocking part of his whole visage. One of his eyes was small and dark while the other one was a vivid, electric blue magical eye, which was moving around independently. Harry would have to admit, Alastor Moody looked extremely creepy, especially with that fake eye of his. Behind the man, a young witch with a pale heart-shaped face was standing looking curious, but also tired at the same time. The woman was staring at him with her pale yellow eyes, which were shining with curiosity while her bubblegum pink short hair was resting on her shoulders. Harry would have to admit, the young witch was probably the most eccentric witch he ever laid his eyes upon, but he didn't linger on it. That's Alastor Moody and I don't know anything about the girl, but she seems really young. I will place her somewhere around Jacqueline's age. Lily confirmed the man's identity before she tried to identify the young witch, but nothing came to her mind. You knew we were coming. Alastor stated gruffly as his magical eye continued to spin around. But you didn't prepare an ambush. Alastor shook his head in disappointment. Come on, Mad Eye, cut him some slack. He is yet to start his 4th year, you can't expect him to be paranoid like you. He is probably scared out of his mind thinking that we are probably robbers or some sort of creeps. The witch complained as she frantically waved her hands in the air. Harry felt that the witch was probably not that bright, but he decided not to assume anything as she might be acting to make him lower his guard. Alastor's face twitched as he glanced at his protégé, wondering if he made a mistake by choosing such an airhead as his protégé. Then he realized that it was probably his fault. He never told her about the murders. Who are you guys and what do you want from me? Harry stuttered out with a lot of difficulty as he raised his wand in their direction with shaking hands. Since the witch already pointed out that he was yet to start his 4th year, he decided to play the part, but he quickly realized that playing the part of a scared 4th year student was extremely hard. Cut the act, kid. You aren't going to fool me. I already know that you recognized me even though I don't know how you did that, Alastor barked as he stomped inside the apartment, making Harry step back, but his hands were no longer shaking. He didn't even realize that his hands stopped shaking. I simply stepped forward and your hands are no longer shaking, Ulster pointed out with a scoff. Really, matey? He is simply scared stiff. Are you planning to scare him to death? The young witch asked with a scowl, and once again Alastor's face started to twitch in annoyance. Harry realized that he was right. The witch wasn't that bright. Alastor finally decided to give up the jig, as it might also give them an upper hand in the upcoming meeting. Don't be fooled by his young age, lassie. He is already a killer, Alastor snarked, making Harry freeze and the witch snap her head toward Alastor in complete shock. Isn't that right, boy? I know all about the Dursleys. Alastor said smoothly with a triumphant look on his face. Chapter 61, The Meeting Unscheduled, 4. Be careful, Hadrian. Be extremely careful. Think very carefully before saying anything, Lily warned Harry in a grave tone. Lily would have preferred if Hadrian didn't have to answer, but she knew that her son had to say something. If Hadrian didn't say anything, then he would be basically admitting to his crimes. The Dursleys are dead. Harry blurted out in complete surprise. It was obviously an act, but his occlumency was more than enough for this little act. And you think I killed them? Harry asked incredulously. Do you think I am a fool? I have seen their bodies, boy. Alastor snapped, making Harry scoff even though he was barely holding himself together on the inside. He was planning to take a nice and long bath when all of this was finally over to get rid of all the stress. I found magical traces all around the house, and only you could have done that, Alastor accused while glaring at Harry. I wish. Harry snorted bitterly, but on the inside, he was panicking. He didn't expect anyone to notice magical traces. He wasn't expecting anyone from the wizarding world to investigate the deaths in the first place, but not only the deaths were investigated by someone from the wizarding world, but they were investigated by the legendary Alastor Moody. Not only that, but Alastor Moody was also very quick to investigate the scene, as the magical traces should have disappeared in a matter of a couple of days, which probably meant that Albus Dumbledore was somehow monitoring the Dursleys, or someone like Alastor Moody shouldn't have been assigned to investigate some random Muggle murders. Additionally, according to his mom, the man was old and barely functional, so she wasn't even sure if the man was still on the active roster, but if someone like Albus Dumbledore pulled the strings, then he could easily get the case transferred to someone like Alastor Moody, or he might be reading too much into the situation. You are right. Albus might have decided to pay the Dursleys a visit when you never answered your Hogwarts letter, Lily explained helpfully, and Harry internally nodded his head in agreement. Meanwhile, Alastor was intently staring at Harry, trying to get a read on him. Yes, the boy did have the motive to commit the murders, but it didn't mean that he was responsible for killing them. After all, there was no proof connecting the boy to the murders except for the signs of magic and the obvious motive. Even though he didn't have any proof, Alastor knew in his gut that it was the boy who killed them. Wait! 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 Time out! Tonks exclaimed with a gobsmacked look on her face as she frantically started to gesture time out with her hands in a dramatic fashion. What the bloody hell is going on? Tonks asked in complete bewilderment as her eyes kept switching between Harry and Alastor. What she didn't notice was the fact that her eyes and hair were continuously cycling through various colors. Harry's eyes grew wide in surprise and awe as he kept staring at the only witch in the room. Her eyes and hair were cycling through various colors. Whoa! Wandless magic! Harry exclaimed in complete awe. The witch might have been a bit dumb, but at the same time, she was quite impressive. Tonks blinked after hearing Harry's words, and the confused look on her face transformed into a proud look. Haha! I wish. Oh sorry, I was kinda overwhelmed there. My name is Tonks, just Tonks, and I am a metamorphmagus, the witch introduced herself with a beaming smile on her face. Harry inclined his head with a confused look on his face. Metamagu, what? Harry asked in confusion. Metamorphmagus, Tonks corrected proudly. A metamorph magi is a witch or wizard who has the ability to change their physical appearance through sheer will alone, and before you ask, I can't teach you how to become a metamorphmagus. Metamorphmagus are born, not made, Tonks explained smugly as she rubbed the base of her nose, looking extremely pleased with herself. To be honest, if Harry said that he wasn't disappointed when he learned that he couldn't become a metamorphmagus, then it would be a lie. The witch may not be using wandless magic to shift the color of her eyes and her hair, but it was still extremely impressive. She is somehow related to the House of Black. Sirius once told me that they used to have quite a few metamorphmagus in their family a few centuries ago, Lily explained when she finally heard the explanation from Tonks. She had heard it from Sirius, but since it wasn't important, she had shoved it at the back of her mind. While Harry wanted to know how she was related to the Blacks, he decided to put it aside for the time being. He still had other important things to deal with, as he still didn't know why the two of them were watching him or why the two of them decided to creep into his apartment at this dreadful hour. It's still quite impressive. Harry mumbled with an impressed look on his face, stroking Tonks' ego even more. Nice you make your acquaintance, just Tonks. I am Harry Potter, and I would still like to know why you guys are here at this hour. Harry introduced himself as his lips thinned in displeasure, making Tonks sputter in embarrassment. Meanwhile, Alastor was simply watching the duo from the sidelines with a disappointed look on his face. He wasn't disappointed in the boy, in fact, he was quite impressed with him, but he couldn't say the same for his protégé. Misdirecting his protégé from a particular topic was laughingly easy, and the boy unknowingly discovered the fact and took advantage of it. His protégé would never be able to interrogate anyone. Haha. Very funny, Tonks said drily when he called her just Tonks. I don't have a first name. Tonks, that is my name, Tonks said with a huff. All right, Tonks. Harry said as he nodded his head. So, why are you here? Harry asked as his gaze switched between Alastor and Tonks. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I am Alastor. Moody Alastor sighed as he introduced himself. While the boy and Tonks were chatting, he also realized that he shouldn't have brought up the murders at the start. Now the boy would raise his guard even more. Alastor cursed his stupidity inside his mind. He blamed his straight-to-the-point attitude. He was quite aware of his shortcomings, so he knew that his straight-to-the-point attitude was completely worthless when it came to politics. With his attitude and personality, there was no way he could talk around in circles, which was kind of necessary when it came to politics. That was also why he never tried to take the mantle of the director of DMLE after Barty Crouch Sr. retired. Nobody would have denied him the spot if he ever gunned for the director position, but he knew that he couldn't handle all the politicking. He realized that he should have tried politicking, instead of trying to get him on the back foot from the start. Not only did he fail spectacularly in that regard, but he also ended up spooking the boy. Now there was no way that the boy was ever going to trust them or open up to them. If Saul's speculation was right and the prophecy basically entailed that only Harry Potter could defeat you-know-who, then they needed the boy on their side. Albus was clearly running with his own agenda, and he wanted the boy in his corner for whatever reasons. Alastor was there during the war and didn't like how the war turned out. If it wasn't for Lily Potter and the boy standing in front of him, they would have lost the war. Albus wanted to avoid killing the Death Eaters, and he refused to reconsider his methods while the Death Eaters refused to follow the same rules. Albus was driving their side into early graves with his idealistic morals. If Voldemort returned, then there would be another war, and he didn't want the upcoming war to go like the last war. I don't know if you have heard or not, but Sirius Black has been found innocent. He is your godfather if you are wondering why you should be concerned about him, Alastor explained with an unsure look on his face. He knew that he had messed up, so he was practically starting the conversation completely anew. I have read about him in the paper. I have to admit, I am not impressed with the British Ministry of Magic, Harry drawled with a bland look on his face. Alastor had to agree with the boy on that point. There are a lot of things happening back in Britain, and there are some things which directly concern you. So, we thought that you would probably appreciate the information, Alastor explained with a sniff as he grabbed his hip flask and took a small sip. Wow! I didn't know you could talk like that, Mad Eye Tonks whistled with an impressed look on her face. Alastor immediately threw her a dirty look. He was already having a hard time since playing it nice wasn't one of his fortes, and now his protégé was making it even harder for him. He shouldn't have brought her with him in the first place. I do appreciate the information, Harry admitted slowly while nodding his head. All right, do you guys want anything? Tea, coffee, or? Harry asked, but he stopped before he could finish the offer when Tonks raised her hand in the air like she was in a class. Can I have chilled cola along with some hamburgers? Tonks asked excitedly, only for Harry to turn towards Alastor, who was intently staring at the wall, trying to ignore his protégé. Chapter 62, The Meeting Unscheduled, v. So, what did you guys want to talk about? Harry asked as he sat down on the opposite side of the dining table with a coffee mug in his hands. Alastor sniffed the liquid inside his own coffee mug before taking a small sip. He opened and closed his mouth a few times as he savored the taste for a few moments before finally grunting in approval. Whoa! This is so good! Tonks groaned in satisfaction as she bit into the chicken burger. Unfortunately, Harry didn't have any ham in stock, and he wasn't willing to send off Norton to grab ham at this dreadful hour, so Chicken had to do. Thanks for the food, man, you are a savior, Tonks gushed out gratefully. You are welcome, Harry accepted her gesture with a smile. It seems, at least, one of you is embracing the unhealthy American lifestyle, Harry pointed out as Tonks continued to enjoy her chicken burger and cola. Heck yet! Tonks exclaimed cheerfully. That food back at home is bland, Tonks whined, but moments later, she cheered up again when she took another bite of her burger. Alastair cleared his throat to gain both of their attention. I think we are getting off topic here, Alastair huffed, looking irritated. Yes, you are right. We are getting off topic, Harry admitted his mistake, and Tonks simply gave Alastair a sheepish look and decided to remain silent until Mad Eye was done with his chat. Then there was also the fact that she didn't know what Mad Eye wanted to talk about in the first place, and she also wanted to enjoy her chicken burgers in complete silence. How much do you know about Albus Dumbledore? Alastair asked while tapping his fingers on the coffee mug. Harry stared at the man for a few moments before he finally started to speak. He is the headmaster of Hogwarts, he is the chief warlock of Wizengamot, and he is also the supreme mugwump of Wizengamot, Harry answered before taking a small sip from his own coffee mug. Oh, and he was also the founder of the Order of the Phoenix, Harry added thoughtfully. Alastair nodded his head in understanding. I have to admit, you know quite a lot. Tell me, boy, how did you know about the Order? Alastair asked gruffly, his paranoia kicking in. I did a lot of research. Why do you think I am here attending Ilvermorny instead of Hogwarts? A lot of Death Eaters escaped justice by claiming imperious defense, and I consider all of them my enemies. Since I researched the Death Eaters, obviously I also researched their opposition. The Ministry and the Order of the Phoenix, Harry explained firmly. Alastair gave Harry an impressed look while Tonks simply gaped at Harry like he had grown a second head. I have to admit, I am impressed. You did your homework. Alastair grunted appreciatively. Recently he also caught Peter Pettigrew, Harry added with a small nod of his head. Yes, though Pettigrew escaped, Alastair griped unhappily. He wanted to see how the boy would react if he mentioned the traitor, but he was surprised when the boy didn't show anger. Instead, the boy simply grimaced. What Alastair didn't know was the fact that his words weren't the reason why Harry grimaced. Don't worry, my son. We will get him and then we will skin him alive. After that, make him eat his own skin and choke on it, Lily stated darkly, and her words were the reason why Harry grimaced. Or maybe we can cut out his intestine and make him eat his own intestines, Lily wondered nonchalantly, and the grimace on Harry's face intensified. Calm down, Mom, Harry said softly in an attempt to stop his mom from providing any more gory illustrations. He didn't want to skin anyone, nor did he want to feed anyone their own intestines. That was gross and wrong on so many levels. Harry would have to admit, Peter Pettigrew deserved the goriest death, but he was satisfied with giving him a simple but painful death. Sorry. Sorry. I simply hate that man, Lily sighed as she decided to stop for the time being. If it was up to her, then she would make his death way more terrible than anything she suggested, but she realized that her baby boy wasn't ready to hear all that. If she ever regained a body, then she could always take care of such things behind his back like any other good mother would do. Yes, that was what she was going to do. Lily nodded her head in satisfaction and decided to drop the matter for the time being. Her Hadrian wouldn't need to get his hands dirty. That was why she was there. It was a mother's duty to take care of her son's problems without him knowing anything. I don't think you came here to tell me about Pettigrew. Did you come here on my godfather's behalf? Harry asked after a few moments of silence when he noticed Alastair was watching him intently. No. I am not here on his behalf, Alastair immediately denied with a sniff. I have my own reasons for reaching out to you. I am here to warn you, Alastair stated after a few moments of silence. He could have told the boy the truth, but the problem was that he couldn't trust the boy. His very nature was screaming at him against trusting the boy, and he also knew that the boy might try to blackmail them if he came to know that he was the only one who could beat Voldemort. For the moment, he decided to keep the prophecy and continued existence of Voldemort to himself. Warn me. Harry inclined his head with a confused look on his face. For whatever reason, Albus Dumbledore is obsessed with you. Did you know it was him who placed you at the Dursleys? Alastair asked with a growl, only for Harry to stare at him with wide eyes before he finally ended up shaking his head in denial. Harry obviously wasn't going to tell him that he knew that Albus Dumbledore was the one who placed him at the Dursleys, as doing that would bring up the question of how he knew that, and Harry couldn't have anyone asking that type of questions. He was also aware of the fact that the man was probably obsessed with him, and he could also guess why. Well, now you know. Alastair huffed with a shrug. For whatever reason, he wants you back in Britain and he is planning to use the Goblet of Fire to bring you back, Alastor finally revealed after beating around the bush for so long. Goblet of Fire? What's that? Harry asked with a grave look on his face. He didn't know what the Goblet of Fire was, but it must be something very powerful or Albus won't be trying to use that to bring him back to Britain. Have you heard of the Triwizard Tournament? Alastor asked, and once again Harry shook his head in denial, but that wasn't the same case for Lily. She had seen the mentions of the Triwizard Tournament in a couple of books. It used to be a magical contest held between the 3 largest wizarding schools in Europe, and that was all she knew about the Triwizard Tournament. The Triwizard Tournament is a magical contest held between the 3 largest wizarding schools in Europe, Hogwarts, Durmstrang, and Beauxbatons, and each of these schools are represented by one champion. The tournament was discontinued at some point after 1792 due to the high death toll, Alastor slowly explained. Even he was having a hard time trying to recall everything he had learned about the damn tournament. Meanwhile, Tonks was simply listening to the conversation with wide eyes as her gaze continued to switch between the duo while sipping her chilled cola. She didn't even know how to react to the bombs Alastor was dropping with his words, so she decided it would be best to sit this one out. Whatever was going on, it was way out of her league. They are planning to bring it back, or at least, it was Albus who pitched in the idea. Now, the problem is, an artifact called Goblet of Fire is used to choose the champions. The students write their name on a piece of paper and drop it inside the goblet spits out a name, one student for each school, and after the name comes out, the goblet binds the participants with an unbreakable magical contract, which prevents anyone from backing out, Alastor explained solemnly. Both Harry's and Tonks' eyes grew wide in shock and surprise. Wait. So, if someone puts my name and it comes out, then I will have to participate or I lose my magic. Tonks gasped in horror. She wanted to avoid butting into this conversation, but she wasn't able to stop herself after learning about the Goblet of Fire. Yes, Alastor confirmed with a huff, making both Harry and Tonks pale. For the next couple of minutes, nobody said anything. Dumbledore is planning to place my name in the cup, isn't he? Harry was the one who broke the silence and his voice was barely higher than a whisper. Alastor gave him a stiff nod and Harry decided to continue. But how is he going to make sure that my name comes out? Harry asked skeptically. That I don't know, but since he is planning to use the damn goblet, he must have a way, Alastor grumbled, and Harry had to admit, Alastor did have a point. For the next few minutes, nobody said anything. Is there anything else you wanted to tell me? Harry asked, breaking the silence once again. No. Alastor admitted gruffly as he emptied the contents of his coffee mug with a huge swig. After that, he slowly stood up, making Tonks fumble with her cola sup, which slipped out of her hands in the process, spilling the contents on the glass on the table. Sorry. Tonks muttered out an apology while looking down at her feet in shame, and Alastor simply sighed in defeat at her clumsiness. It's all right. I will ask Norton to give you a refill, Harry said as he pointed his wand at the table and muttered the cleaning spell along with appropriate wand movements, and the spilled liquid disappeared without leaving another trace. All right then. We won't be taking your time anymore. It is already too late and we also need to return, Alastor said impatiently. Harry summoned Norton and told him to bring another cola cup for Tonks. The said witch accepted the cup with a beaming smile on her face and thanked him profusely before Harry walked them out of his apartment. Chapter 63, the chapter unnamed, I. Harry's apartment, July 20, 1994. Harry took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. It has been 5 days since the surprise visit and he was still reeling from all the implications and everything he learned from the meeting. Since then, Harry had been trying to find everything he could about the Triwizard Tournament in the Potter Library. He was able to find out quite a lot about the tournament as a whole, but much to his and Mom's frustrations, they weren't able to find much on the Goblet of Fire. After all, the Goblet of Fire was the main issue, since the goblet was responsible for binding the participants with the unbreakable magical contracts. From what he learned from the Potter Library, the Goblet of Fire is an ancient artifact, and much to his displeasure, they believed that it was an infallible artifact, but Harry already knew that the artifact wasn't infallible. Dumbledore obviously knew a way to make sure that his name came out of the goblet, which meant that the goblet could be manipulated, so it wasn't infallible. I don't trust them, Lily grumbled with a scowl. At least, I don't trust Moody. He and Dumbledore are friends, so I don't understand why he decided to warn you behind his back, Lily continued unhappily. Maybe they had a falling off, Harry guessed unconvincingly. Look, Mom, I am not saying that I trust them, but I am not foolish enough to completely disregard their warning, Harry stated firmly. I agree, but you need to take a break, Lily pointed out. You have been scheming through the Potter library for the last 5 days without much sleep. This way, you will simply burn yourself out, Lily explained, her voice filled with worry and concern. You are right. Maybe, I should reach back to Jacqueline and Brittany. The two of them seemed to be quite worried in their last letter, Harry wondered internally as he grabbed 2 parchments from a stack along with a quill. He quickly penned down 2 letters, one for Jacqueline and the other one for Brittany, telling them that he was all right and he would meet them in the evening. When he was finally done with the letters, he stood up and started to make his way toward Hedwig's perch, who was eagerly waiting for him with one of her talons pushed forward. He no longer had any doubts over the fact that Hedwig was his familiar. Who's the good girl? Who's the good girl? Harry asked as he started to stroke her feathers, making Hedwig lean into his hands as she started to purr in satisfaction. You are, Harry said as he continued to stroke her feathers. Here. I have 2 letters for you to carry. One is for Brittany and the other one is for Jacqueline, Harry said after stroking her features for a couple of minutes while showing her the letters. Hedwig pricked in understanding. Harry knew she was a smart girl and she wouldn't have any problems delivering the letters to their recipients. After that, he quickly tied the letters to her legs and stroked her head. Have a safe trip and you can take your time on the way back, Harry instructed, and Hedwig screeched cheerfully as she unfurled her wings and flew out of the window. Now that Hedwig was gone, he felt like his bed was calling to him. He sighed and decided to take a shower before giving in to his calling. Time skip, later that evening. I am all right, Jackie. You don't need to keep fussing around me, Harry sighed tiredly. Fine. I will stop nagging you, but I am simply worried, Jacqueline hugged in annoyance. I know. Harry admitted with a soft, but tired smile on his face. Is there something going on between the two of you? Brittany asked accusingly as she stared at Harry and Jacqueline intently. Jacqueline simply burst out laughing after hearing Brittany's words, whereas Harry simply deadpanned at Brittany. There is nothing going like that between the two of us, Harry answered drily. Well, you know that I am not into dating bullshit and all that, but it was cute the way you asked. Jacqueline said with a grin. So, Harry, are you planning to meet your godfather? Jacqueline asked, changing the topic. I don't know. He hasn't tried to reach out to me yet, but they might have barred him from reaching out to anyone high profile, Harry pointed at himself. Until he gets a clear bill from the mind healers, Harry explained thoughtfully with a shrug. How very humble of you, but I do agree with you, Brittany said blandly as she pushed up her glasses. I guess that's that, Jacqueline muttered dismissively. So, are you finally ready to resume our training? Jacqueline asked with an excited glint in her eyes. Are you really that eager to get your ass beaten into the ground? Harry asked in an amused tone, only for Jacqueline to scowl as she threw him a dirty look while Brittany simply smirked in amusement. What did I say, Hadrian? No cursing or swearing before you are 14, Lily pointed out sweetly, only for Harry to give her a mental shrug. Come on, Mom. 10 more days until I turn 14. I am simply getting some practice, Harry delivered his excuse innocently, only for Lily to scoff at him. I admit, that was a good try, but I am not going to budge on this one, son, Lily retorted in an amused tone. Harry internally sighed in defeat and agreed to wait until he was finally 14. Well, I am not that eager to get my ass beaten, but I know I am getting stronger and I do love dueling, Jacqueline explained blandly. By the way, Harry, I would need to add you to the wards in my house. I have already added Brittany, Jacqueline added as she remembered that her new house was no longer lacking wards. Oh. When did the ward stone arrive? Harry asked curiously as he perked up at her words. He could finally start learning how to apparate and create port keys. It arrived 3 days ago and then the goblins erected the best wards money could buy in the next 5 hours. They might be greedy little fuckers, but they are really good at what they do, Jacqueline admitted unhappily. Can you please mind your language? We are in a public place. Brittany said as she stared at Jacqueline disapprovingly. Now, Jacqueline is a well-mannered and well-educated girl, so she maturely made a face at Brittany. Thank God, Harry doesn't have a stick up his ass, Jacqueline sighed gratefully, and Brittany looked like she was about to go ballistic for a moment before the younger girl finally started to calm down. By the way, did you already place the traps around your house? Harry asked as he inclined his head. He decided to change the topic before an argument between Jacqueline and Brittany could break out. Brittany and I have been working on setting everything up, like digging pits along the ward line and all that, but we haven't started placing the traps," Jacqueline quickly explained while shaking her head. "You will be helping, right?" Jacqueline asked him, already knowing the answer. "Of course, I will be helping," Harry immediately agreed. "Good. Grab everything you need, you will be staying over," Jacqueline decided impatiently as she stood up. "Don't I get to say anything?" Harry asked in an amused tone as he stood up too. "Nope." Jacqueline immediately denied his request as she started to drag Harry and Brittany out of the cafe. "Calm down, Jackie. Neither of us are going to run away," Harry said as he rolled his eyes in exasperation, but Jacqueline simply continued to drag him and Brittany, completely ignoring his words. He knew why Jacqueline was so excited. The older girl was badly missing their spars. Harry simply looked at Brittany, who looked kind of defeated, and after watching Brittany, Harry also decided to admit defeat. It's completely useless to argue with Jacqueline whenever she was like this, so he simply allowed himself to be dragged by the overly excited witch. Time skip, July 30, 1994. Harry stared at the clock and nodded his head in satisfaction. A few minutes were left before it was finally midnight and Harry was done with all of his preparations. He was using a part of a Thunderbird heart for the ritual as it was simply impossible for him to afford the whole damn thing. If he could access the Potter vaults, then he could have afforded the whole heart. Using the whole heart would have given him better results than using a small part of it, but Thunderbirds are rarer than dragons, so whole Thunderbird hearts are only sold in auctions. His budget was too small to buy something like a Thunderbird heart from an auction. "You are finally going to finish the set. Are you excited?" Lily asked in a gleeful tone. "Yeah," Harry admitted. He was quite excited about the power boost he was going to receive. Nothing much happened in the last 10 days. He had been training with Jacqueline and helping her around with the traps. They created pits all around the house along the ward line and filled the pits with flesh-eating slugs before covering the pits with some loose ground using magic. Then they planted man-eating Venus flytraps in random spots along the ward line as they wanted to avoid creating a pattern for the traps. "I need all the power I could if I am going to be dragged into the Tri-Wizard tournament against my wishes," Harry added bitterly, and Lily barely stopped herself from going on another gory rant. She was already conceiving the goriest way to kill Albus Dumbledore, but her baby boy didn't need to know that. "I know. It's almost time, I think you should be getting ready," Lily said softly as she reminded him that it was almost time. Harry gave her a mental nod as he untied his robe and shrugged it off his shoulders. A blush crept up on his face as his penis started to get erect. Recently, he started having erections whenever he would bare himself in front of his mom. It was like a guilty pleasure to him. He was quite aware of his feelings even though he knew how wrong and unhealthy his feelings were. He also knew that Mom was all right about his feelings, but he still couldn't bring himself to act on his feelings due to some misplaced guilt. "That looks quite painful," Lily breathed out, staring at his raging hard-on, making his penis twitch and the blush on his face intensified. It was almost painful with how hard it was. "You know you should take care of it, or you will end up making a mess inside your boxers," Lily warned him, and as soon as she finished, his penis twitched again. "I don't know, Mom. I will think about it," Harry muttered uncomfortably as he finally stepped into the ritual circle and sat down in the middle of it. As soon as he was seated, he started to exercise occlumency in an attempt to get rid of his erection. Lily also decided not to push him anymore right now as he needed to concentrate on the ritual. When the hands of the clock finally hit 12, Harry tapped his wand on the ritual circle and initiated the ritual. A wave of pain coursed through his body as he felt the magic inside his body started to swell as the ritual started to forcefully densify his magical core. Harry ground his teeth and clenched his fists tightly, trying to bear the pain, but all of a sudden, his chest started to throb in pain. Badump badump. He barely held himself back from placing his hands over his chest. Harry realized something has gone wrong, extremely wrong. Badump badump. His chest continued to throb in pain and the magic inside his body soared as his magical core started to crack, much to his horror. He didn't even notice the fact that the ritual circle has long disappeared. His magic started to leak and Harry finally gave in to the pain and started to scream at the top of his lungs. He felt like chest was going to burst and his mind finally started to blank out as he started to lose his consciousness. "Hadrian! Hadrian!" He heard his mom's voice, hysterically screaming inside his mind, but the pain was simply too much. He finally closed his eyes in pain when his magical core shattered like a glass orb. Badump badump. Badump badump. And then there was nothing. Season 2, ends. Chapter 64, The Chapter Unnamed, 2. Harry groggily opened his eyes and memories immediately started to flow into his mind. Harry blinked as he remembered what happened last night, and from what he remembered, he never made it to his bed. He was in so much pain that he had passed out on the floor, but now he was resting on his bed. He quickly realized that Norton was probably responsible for his current predicament. Hadrian! Hadrian! Ah! Thank Merlin, you are all right. I thought I am going to lose you, Lily sobbed inside his mind, and Harry started to feel really bad for making her cry even though it wasn't exactly his fault. I am sorry, Mom. I don't exactly know what happened, but something happened during the ritual, Harry said as he slowly sat up. He could already feel a lot of difference. His mind was much lighter and way more faster than before. He felt like his mind was also sharper than before, but he needed to test that out. Master Hadrian! You are finally awake? Ah! Norton tried to wake you up, but Master Hadrian wouldn't get up. Norton thought he lost you. Norton, who was sitting beside the bed, exclaimed while sobbing. Once again, Harry started to feel a bit guilty for making Norton worry even though it wasn't his fault. I am all right, Norton. No need to cry. I am not going to leave you, Harry said as he extended his hand and started to pat Norton over his head. Norton smiled brightly and finally started to calm down. You didn't inform anyone, did you? Harry asked when Norton finally calmed down. No, Norton wanted to, but Master Hadrian warned Norton against informing anyone even if something happened. Norton quickly shook his head in denial and Harry sighed in relief. All right. You did well, Norton. Thanks for taking care of me, Harry said softly as he continued to pat Norton. The house elf started to cry again after hearing the praise. After a couple of seconds, Harry's stomach rumbled in hunger and Norton immediately started to wipe off his tears with his sleeves. Master Hadrian, Norton will quickly arrange something for you to eat. Norton exclaimed, his voice filled with worry before he popped away, leaving Harry alone in his room to ponder what happened last night. You have no idea how worried I was. I thought I am going to lose you. Lily's breath hitched and Harry felt a pang in his chest he never felt before. To be honest, he didn't know what to do except for apologizing. I am sorry, Mom. Harry apologized from the deepest part of his heart. No. No. It wasn't your fault, Hadrian. You shouldn't apologize when it wasn't your fault in the first place. Lily sniffed loudly while wiping off her tears with her hands. I am simply glad that you are all right. Lily chuckled softly as she continued to wipe off her tears. So, what happened? Lily asked warily after she finally calmed down. I don't know what happened, but I remember leaking magic when my magical core started to crack. That is the last thing I remember, Harry recalled as he started to inspect himself, but moments later, his eyes grew wide in surprise. He was worrying over the fact that now his magic was probably crippled, but he was proven wrong when he inspected his magical core. Now, he could no longer call his magical core a magical core. Yeah, it might sound weird, but it was true. With a gobsmacked look on his face, he started to inspect the thing which was now occupying the place of his magical core. It felt like a furnace, a brightly burning furnace. No. He was wrong. It wasn't a furnace. It was much more than that. It felt like a sundae. Yes. That was the closest word he was able to find. The brightly burning sun, which was now occupying the place of his magical core, was producing immense amounts of magic. He has never felt so much power in his life. Is this how much raw power Grindelwald, Dumbledore, and Voldemort had in their command? No. Harry quickly shook his head. That wasn't right. The crystallized magical core state is the strongest magical core state, but even the crystallized magical core shouldn't be this powerful, and whatever his magical core has become, it was producing magic on its own and it was steadily supplying power to his body and his body was brimming with magic. He could also feel his body becoming stronger with each passing moment due to the steady power supply from the sundae. No, Harry quickly shook his head. Whatever his magical core has turned into, it was much better than the crystallized magical core, and the crystallized magical core wasn't known to produce its own energy like his son was doing. Fuck that. How was he even inspecting his magical core without his wand in the first place? Harry quickly realized that it wasn't that simple. There was a lot more going on with him. It wasn't just his magical core. He realized that he could easily recall everything perfectly he has experienced in his life. He could even perfectly recall all of his toddler memories when his mom and dad were still alive. How was that even possible? His occlumency might have been quite impressive, but what he was experiencing was something more. It was like he has gained perfect memory or something along those lines, and he already knew that his mind was much sharper than before. No. That wasn't right. Calling his mind sharper than before would be severely underplaying his improvements. If he was better than average before then, now he was easily a genius. Yes, that was right. Harry concluded that something other than the ritual has happened to him. It was simply impossible for him to gain so much from the ritual. Yes, the ritual was probably responsible for triggering whatever happened to him. He realized that he needed to find out what happened to him, but at the same time, he also needed to explore his new powers. Hadrian, what happened? Talk to me, son, Lily called out worriedly, breaking Harry out of his mental rush. Yeah, Mom. I am all right. In fact, I am feeling way better than I have ever felt before. Let me tell you about all the changes. Harry trailed off, and with that, he started to tell her about all the changes in his body. By the time he finished telling her about all the changes, Lily was simply left stumped. It took her a couple of minutes to finally regain her bearings, and when she finally regained her bearings, she started to grin like a loon. She already knew her Hadrian was special, and this was simply proof that she was right. Lily didn't know why or what happened, but she was feeling extremely giddy for her son. Hadrian, I don't know what to say. I am so proud of you, my son, Lily breathed out, her voice brimming with pride. I also don't know what to say except for the fact that I need a shower before doing anything else, Harry muttered dryly as he removed the duvet, only to realize that he wasn't wearing anything. Apparently, Norton never bothered to dress him up, and when he realized that once again his mom could see him in all of his glory, he started to get a hard-on. He groaned and climbed off his bed when he noticed that his wand was resting on his desk, instead of his nightstand. With the thought of getting some clothes inside his mind, he started to make his way toward the desk, but he froze when he heard the shuffling of clothes on his body. He slowly looked down and realized that he was dressed in some casual clothes. What? How? Lily stammered out in complete bewilderment. She had been intently watching his manhood with hunger and need inside her mind, but all of a sudden his body was covered in clothes, which seemed to have appeared out of thin air. No. The clothes didn't appear out of thin air, Hadrian conjured them. Hadrian, you conjured them. Try to cast a spell, Lily requested giddily, completely forgetting about the fact that she was watching her own son's manhood with hunger and need. All right, Harry agreed, as he also realized that he conjured the clothes on his body when he recalled his memories. Harry raised his hand and pointed it at the wall and thought about casting the stunning charm. A red beam came out of his palm and splashed against the wall harmlessly. Harry clutched his hand and whooped in joy. He could cast wandless magic. He could cast fucking wandlessly. Harry didn't know what to say or how to react. He realized that exploring all of his improvements was of utmost priority. So, without wasting any more time, he rushed into the bathroom and vanished his clothes with a simple gesture of his hand. While barely holding himself back from cackling in mad glee, he stepped under the shower and turned on the water. His stomach rumbled again, reminding him of his hunger. Harry decided that as soon as was done filling his stomach with food, he would start exploring his newly acquired powers. He needed to know his limits so that he could learn how to hold back all over again. After all, he wasn't planning to reveal his improvements to the rest of the world anytime soon, especially when he knew the importance of keeping his cards close to his chest. For those who are wondering what happened to Harry/Hadrian, he finally awakened his X-gene, which is basically the essence of Archmage. Now, I am sure some of you are already wondering what is this essence of Archmage. The following points are basically what the essence of Archmage is. 1. Perfect memory with infinite storage. 2. Beyond genius level intellect. 3. Capacity to learn any magic, even unique ones, upon seeing it once or understanding enough about it. This also includes things like ki, chakra, soul power, etc. 4. Possess a supernatural reactor that can adapt to any supernatural energy to fuel spells, enchantments, powers, etc. This reactor provides a steady supply of power that will grow over time. Right now you could use high consumption abilities with wild abandon and still not make much of a dent after a few hours. 5. Can teach others systems even if they previously lacked the capacity. 6. Manipulate entire systems or combine them with experimentation. 7. Are capable of casting any spell as long as you have the energy, not requiring any extra element like a focus or materials. The time required to cast, if any, remains, however. If you are still confused about the essence of Archmage, then you can post paragraph comments here, or you could reach out to me on my Discord server. I hope you guys like the power up. Chapter 65, True Friend Indeed, I. Harry stared at himself in the mirror and he must admit his eyes were much more vibrant than before. That was probably the most noticeable change he noticed after whatever happened to him last night. His body was a bit more chiseled than before and his muscles felt a bit stronger than before, but to be honest, he didn't believe that anybody could notice those changes. Image here. Your eyes are so beautiful. I am jealous, Lily huffed cutely with a pout on her face, making Harry chuckle in amusement. Don't worry, Mom. When I finally build you a body, I will make your eyes vibrant like mine, Harry promised, making Lily hum. He knew that he could definitely build her a body with his newfound intelligence. By the way, do you think I should tell Jacqueline the truth? Harry asked, as there was no way Jacqueline would not notice his eyes and the out-of-the-blue power boost. I think you should tell her some things, but not everything, Lily answered thoughtfully, making Harry nod his head in agreement. Exactly what I was thinking. By the way, I was pondering about the goblet during the shower, and something clicked inside my mind, Harry explained before he snapped his fingers to dry his hair. I was wondering if the goblet could bind me with an unbreakable magical contract with a fake name in the first place, Harry revealed thoughtfully. To be honest, I don't know. For reasons like these, I never called you Hadrian in front of Voldemort, but when it comes to an unbreakable magical contract, a lot depends on the intent. You clearly don't have any intention of participating, and using a fake name shouldn't work, but I can't say anything for sure, Lily mumbled as she started to rub her chin with a deep frown on her face. I see. Is there anything else you can tell me? Harry asked curiously. He was glad that his mom never called him Hadrian in front of Voldemort, which meant that even Voldemort was unaware of his real name. I am sorry, Hadrian, I can't tell you more. Magical contracts are not one of my expertise, Lily admitted morosely, feeling really bad for not being able to help her son. It's all right, Mom. You have already done enough for me and you can't know everything, Harry quickly said, trying to comfort her as what he said was the truth. Though I think there is someone who might be able to help me, Harry added as he scratched the back of his head. He wasn't sure, but that woman was his best bet right now, even though she was as creepy as fuck. With a wave of his hand, Harry dried his body as he walked out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel. He could have conjured clothes for himself, but conjured clothes don't last very long and he still needed to see how long his conjured clothes would last before going public. After all, it would be mortifying if all of his clothes disappeared while walking down the streets minding his own business. He could already see the headlines in his head. The boy who bared. The boy who streaked. There were a few more headlines coming to his mind, but none of them were catchy. He shook his head in amusement and started to get dressed. When he was finally done, he made his way into the kitchen, only to find a plate of eggs Benedict waiting for him. He could see the steam coming out, which meant that the food was still hot. Thanks, Norton. Harry thanked the house elf cheerfully before he started to dig in. Harry stepped through the flue and snapped his fingers to remove the soot from his shoulders. Harry, is that you? Harry heard Jacqueline's voice from outside the house. He used one of the public flues to flew into Jacqueline's house as he still didn't know how to apparate or create portkey yet. Maybe, he will be able to learn them today. With his newfound intelligence, he was sure he could learn them within a day. Yeah, it's me, Harry called out as he started to make his way toward the back door. I am out at the back deck, Jacqueline called out loudly. Though Harry didn't need it as he could already guess where she was. He walked out of the back door, only to find Jacqueline working out. Right now, she was skipping. Harry looked her over and nodded his head in appreciation. He couldn't deny her beauty. Jacqueline finally stopped skipping and dropped the skipping rope as she started to approach him. She opened her arms to pull him into a hug, but all of a sudden she froze and her eyes narrowed at him. You are different, Jacqueline bit out while staring at Harry intently. Yet. Harry muttered with an unsure look on his face and started to rub the back of his head. Something happened yesterday during the last ritual of the set, Harry revealed nervously, and Jacqueline simply urged him to continue, but a look of concern washed over her face when he revealed something happened to him during the ritual. My core changed. I don't know what happened. I don't even know why or how it happened, but it did. Go on, cast the diagnostic charm on me, Harry explained and invited her to use the diagnostic charm on him and stepped forward. Jacqueline frowned at him, but after hearing his words, she was really worried. She was worried that he might have crippled his magic by doing something wrong. She nodded her head mutely and pulled out her wand, which was tucked in her wand holster, and pointed it at Harry. Without saying anything, she cast the diagnostic charm on him, and when she finally received the results, her eyes grew wide in surprise. She was so surprised that she didn't even notice the fact that her wand slipped out of her hand and clattered on the floor. She immediately rushed at Harry and grabbed him by his shoulders. How? How did that happen? Jacqueline asked hurriedly as she started to shake him. Even though she was still shocked and surprised, she couldn't hide her growing excitement. Calm down, Jackie. Calm down, Harry blurted out as he started to feel a bit woozy. How the fuck can I be calm when something like this happened to you? Jacqueline exclaimed, but she did let go of him and raised her hands in the air in exasperation. Do you even know what this means for you? Jacqueline asked, looking extremely giddy for him. I can already guess, Harry answered drily. But I still don't know what happened to my magical core, Harry pointed out. Fuck that. You can be a fucking god. Jacqueline exclaimed in excitement, and before Harry could say anything, tears started to roll down her eyes and she finally broke down. He was taken by surprise when all of a sudden, she started to cry. He immediately rushed at her and pulled her into his arms. What happened, Jackie? Harry asked in a worried tone as he started to rub her back comfortingly. I am happy, you fool. Happy for you, Jackie said while wiping off her eyes with her hands. I know you have a lot of enemies and I was so worried for you. Now, I don't need to be. Jacqueline shook her head as a smile formed on her face. She had long accepted the fact that Harry was someone who is bound to be much greater than her, so she didn't feel jealous. Not even in the slightest. In fact, she was happy for him. I know you have secrets and your drive to become stronger isn't something normal. I have seen it on your face. You are worried about something, Jacqueline revealed, surprising Harry. He thought he had hidden it well, but apparently, he was wrong. Does Brittany know? Harry asked with a hint of concern in his voice, only for Jacqueline to shake her head in denial. Harry sighed in relief. She was nothing like Jacqueline, so he wanted to keep her as far as he could from his enemies. I am sorry. Harry started to apologize, but Jacqueline stopped him by placing a finger on his lips. No need to apologize, Harry. We all have our own secrets, Jacqueline said in an understanding tone while giving him a nod. Tell her about Voldemort and the goblet. She is a keeper. Everyone needs someone who they can talk with without all pretenses. Lily urged him to reveal some of his secrets to Jacqueline. She wasn't happy with the fact that her son and Jacqueline will be getting even closer after this conversation, but her Hadrian needed to do this. Are you sure, Mom? Harry asked in an unsure tone. Yes, I am sure. You need someone like her in your life. Someone who will stand by your side no matter what happens. She has been helping you from the start, I think she deserves this chance, Lily explained softly. Jacqueline never showed any interest in Hadrian, which obviously helped her decision. All right, Harry nodded his head in understanding. He stared at Jacqueline. Jackie, there are a few things I need to tell you. I should have done this some time ago, but it's better late than never, Harry chuckled. There is no need to force yourself to tell me your secrets, Harry. I understand, Jacqueline said while giving him an understanding nod, but Harry quickly shook his head. No, I need to tell you, Harry said quickly, and then his features softened. I want to tell you, Harry said softly, and Jacqueline nodded her head in understanding. All right. I will ask Morcy to bring us something, Jacqueline said as she started to make her way toward the chairs, followed by Harry. The two of them sat down and Harry started to tell her about Voldemort, making her go pale like a ghost. Chapter 66, True Friend Indeed, 2. That's all, Harry finished tiredly as he stared at Jacqueline, who was playing with her butterbeer bottle with a blank look on her face. Harry sighed tiredly as he felt a pang of regret. I will understand if you don't want to be my friend anymore, Harry sighed sadly while shaking his head. Jacqueline blinked in surprise as her brain finally booted back to reality, and as soon as she realized what he said at last, she whacked him on the back of his head. That's not happening, kiddo. Jacqueline said sternly while wagging her finger in front of his face. I will be honest, I am scared. I have read about him, and from what I have read, he was a monster, but that doesn't mean that I am going to stop being your friend, Jacqueline said with a determined look on her face as she stared straight into Harry's eyes. Are you sure, Jackie? He is going to come after me as soon as he returns. I am someone he failed to kill, I am a black mark on his reputation. Not only that, but he also lost his body when he came to kill me. He won't rest until I am dead. If he can't reach me, then he will start targeting my friends and their families, Harry explained, only for Jacqueline to shake her head. Yes, I can already guess that, Jacqueline admitted sullenly, but she didn't seem to lose any of her determination. I am already aware of the risks, and even if I stop being your friend, there is no guarantee that he won't attack me or my family, Jacqueline pointed out, and Harry had to admit, she was right. All right. If you are sure about this, then I am not going to try to scare you away anymore, Harry said while nodding his head, but on the inside, he was feeling extremely happy. He was half expecting her to leave him, but all of his worries turned out to be unnecessary. Ah! You were trying to scare me away to protect me. That's cute. Jacqueline snickered and pinched one of his cheeks with an amused look on her face, only for Harry to slap away her hand as he gave her an annoyed look. So, what now? Jacqueline asked, completely unbothered by his actions. I am planning to meet Violetta Bovias. She might be able to answer some of my questions, Harry explained cryptically as he played with his own butterbeer bottle, which was still half filled. When he noticed the questioning look on Jacqueline's face, he remembered that he never told her about his real name. Well, Harry is not my given name. My given name is Hadrian, so I was wondering if the goblet will be able to trap me with an unbreakable contract without my real name, Harry explained, and a look of realization dawned on Jacqueline's face. Wow! Now I am not sure if I should feel happy that you finally trust me enough to tell me your real name, or should I feel angry for you being such an asshole, Jacqueline said while giving him a pointed look. After glaring at him for a few moments, she sighed in defeat and her shoulders slumped down. I am not saying that I am completely happy about this, but I can understand why you did it, Jacqueline said while smiling softly. Thanks for understanding, Jackie. To be honest, I don't have any excuses for hiding my real name all this time. I guess I was simply insecure. Harry wondered while chuckling mirthlessly. What's done is done. Jacqueline decided to dismiss the topic and move on. Moving on, I don't know shit about unbreakable contracts, but I do have some family books in our library. You might find something useful in them, and as for asking Violetta Bovias, she is old. Very old. So, she might be able to help you, Jacqueline said with a shrug. Can you get me the books? Harry asked in a hopeful tone. Jacqueline may not be anything like the purebloods back in Britain, but purebloods are extremely protective of their family books, so he wasn't sure if she would give him the books or not. Sure. Just wait here while I grab them from my family manor. Jacqueline happily agreed to hand him the books and stood up to leave, but she stopped when Harry started to speak again. I still need to get used to my raw magic, so your backyard might get wrecked. Harry jerked his thumb toward the training pit in the backyard. Meh. Go nuts, Jacqueline shrugged dismissively. By the way, don't tell Brittany anything about Voldemort or the goblet, Jacqueline reminded him, and Harry nodded his head in understanding. Both of them wanted to keep Brittany as far as possible from all this shit, as she is not a fighter. Both of them were on the same page in this regard. After that, Jacqueline disappeared into the house, leaving Harry alone on the deck. He took a deep breath and started to make his way toward the training pit. That went much better than I was expecting, Lily admitted thoughtfully. Yeah, Harry agreed with her. I was expecting her to scream at me or at least, call me a liar, but she straight out believed everything I said, Harry said as he recalled the whole discussion. You told her your real name. I wasn't expecting that, Lily admitted, but Harry didn't miss the questioning tone in her voice. Harry finally arrived inside the training pit and decided to conjure a simple plastic chair. It worked. A plastic chair appeared out of thin air just beside him. I realized, she deserves to know my real name when she decided to keep being my friend even after learning about Voldemort, Harry explained as he continued to test his powers. He decided to conjure different materials so that he could test the limits of his newfound raw magic, but he quickly realized that it was a foolish venture. Marble is supposedly one of the hardest materials to conjure, but he could conjure it fine. Precious metals, such as gold, silver, and platinum are also some of the hardest materials to conjure, but he could also conjure them with extreme ease. He finally decided to conjure food, which is supposed to be impossible, and his eyes grew wide as saucers when a lump of noodles appeared right in front of him. He just freaking destroyed Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration. He conjured food out of thin air, which should have been impossible. Even Lily was left completely gobsmacked inside his mind. Even though Harry was shocked to his core, he quickly regained his bearing and decided to inspect the noodles. His mind was going overboard at the implications, but he realized that he needed to run some tests before reaching any conclusion. Harry rubbed his chin and thought about casting a diagnostic charm on noodles, but nothing happened. He frowned and tried again, but once again, nothing happened. He started to wonder why he couldn't cast a simple diagnostic charm when he could break Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration without even trying, and that is when something clicked into his mind. He pointed one of his fingers at the lump of noodles and cast the diagnostic charm, and this time, it worked. Harry immediately reached some conclusions inside his mind. He realized that for some spells to work, he needed to direct them with his limbs, while some spells worked perfectly fine even with a simple thought. He needed to conduct more tests, but for now, he decided to ponder the results he received from the diagnostic charm. According to the diagnostic charm he used, the food was real, but at the same time, it wasn't. Harry scratched his chin and decided to cast a few more diagnostic charms to get a better understanding of his creation. It took him only a couple of minutes more to finally reach a conclusion. Apparently, he did break the Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration by conjuring food, but at the same time, he failed to completely break the law. The food was real and it would taste like real food, but the noodles he conjured didn't contain any nutrients, which made it impossible for anyone including him to survive by consuming conjured food. The conjured food wouldn't even satiate anyone's hunger. Even though he wouldn't gain anything from the food he conjured, it was still a groundbreaking discovery, as he could still consume the conjure food to get the taste of the real food. Minerva would have a stroke if she ever saw you conjuring food, Lily pointed out and started to cackle madly. Harry rubbed his chin with a thoughtful look and tried to conjure an organ. According to Gamp's law, just like food, it was simply impossible for someone to conjure an organ. Harry didn't know if he would succeed or not, but he really wasn't expecting a mass of flesh to appear in front of him. His eyebrows twitched and quickly realized his mistake. He didn't know enough about the organ he was trying to conjure, so it turned into an unrecognizable lump of flesh. Son, don't downplay your achievement. It should have been impossible to conjure flesh, but here you are. You have no idea how proud I am feeling right now. Lily beamed at her son with a proud look on her face. You are right, but I know I can do better than this. I know I can do much more than this, Harry said in a determined tone as he continued to test his powers. Chapter 67, The Boy Who Exchanged. There were quite a few things Harry was able to discover about his newfound powers in the span of a few hours. First of all, he could cast all the spells he knew without a wand, and none of the spells in his arsenal could put even the slightest dent in his vast amounts of magical reserves, especially with his reactor constantly producing enormous amounts of magic. At some point during his testing, he decided reactor is a much more appropriate moniker for his self-sustaining magical core, which was constantly producing enormous amounts of energy, magic, similar to a nuclear reactor, instead of calling it Sunday. Harry may not be living among the Muggles, but he knew very well what a nuclear reactor is. While testing, he also discovered the fact that if he wanted to cast any sort of combat-oriented spells, he would need to use his hand or fingers to aim the spell in the right direction. It wasn't a deal-breaker or anything, as being able to cast spells wandlessly was already a pretty huge deal in his books. After conducting a lot of tests, there was something else he realized. It was his reactor that was enabling him to cast the spells wandlessly. For everyone else, they would need to practice a spell for years if they ever want to cast it wandlessly. Not only that, but they would also need to have a very strong intent, as without a very strong intent, it would be simply impossible for them to cast a spell wandlessly, but that wasn't the case for him. He could simply cast the spells wandlessly, as it was completely normal for him. He could still use a wand, and that too felt completely normal to him, meaning wand or not, he could cast spells without any problems. He wasn't able to test everything, as Jacqueline returned with a bunch of family books about unbreakable contracts, but much to his irritation, he only found a big fat load of nothing in those books. That was why he and Jacqueline were standing right outside Violetta Beauvais wand shop. Harry, I think I will wait outside. I don't want to intrude on something personal and all that, Jacqueline offered magnanimously as she started to step back with an uncomfortable look on her face. Some friend you are, Harry snarked, giving her a betrayed look, only for Jacqueline to shrug her shoulders. She creeps the fuck out of me, Jacqueline admitted uncomfortably, but moments later, a beaming smile appeared on her face. I will be waiting for you at the ice parlor. You know how busy that place is at this time of year, so I will be saving you a seat. After all, I am a nice friend. Bye. Jacqueline exclaimed cheerfully before she quickly made herself scarce. Fuck, Harry cursed inside his mind as he turned back toward the entrance of the shop in trepidation. Good luck, son. I know you will be all right, Lily tried to comfort him, but even she wasn't convinced by her own words. Love you too, Mom, Harry retorted. The sarcasm in his voice was so thick that could probably cut a diamond or two with it. He pushed the door open and entered the shop. A small bell chime rang throughout the shop, and he closed the door behind him as he started to inspect the shop. The shop was ancient, just like the ancient shop owner. Hello, is anyone there? Harry called out loudly as he continued to inspect the shop. Hadrian Potter, what a surprise! Violetta Beauvais appeared from the back of the shop and Harry was never going to admit, but he jumped a bit when she started to speak out of nowhere. Both of their eyes met for a few seconds and Harry felt a prickling sensation in his eyes. He barely held himself back from blurting out a curse when all of a sudden, Violetta's name appeared on the top of her head along with her wand specifications. He could also see the size and density of her magical core. She had a solid-state magical core, which he didn't find surprising at all. After all, Violetta may not be a fighter, but she had to be quite powerful to have lived as long as she did. Violetta narrowed her eyes at him and then she started to laugh creepily as she started to fiddle with her fingers, making Harry take a step back instinctively. Kukiku. How curious. How curious. I wonder what happened to you. The woman stepped forward with an odd glint in her eyes. Harry felt like he was being treated like a lab rat. I have some questions, Harry said, trying to get this over as quickly as he could while wondering how he could stare into her very being all of a sudden. As a matter of fact, I also have some questions. How about we exchange? Violetta suggested, looking very interested. Can we not? Harry asked, even though he already knew the answer as he finally reached the conclusion that somehow he was able to copy Violetta's magic. Kukiku. Don't be like that. Think of this as paying me back for copying my magic without asking for my permission. Violetta giggled creepily as she walked up to Harry. Harry stiffened when she called him out, but for the time being he decided to play her game, instead of trying to attack her. After all, he had no idea what sort of defenses she was sporting inside the shop or if she could defend herself in the first place or not. Alright, but I don't know how I copied your magic. By the way, do you have a name for spell? Harry asked as he forced himself to relax. It is much more than a spell, young man. It is a complex and obscure form of magic, which is used by wand makers or foci makers like us to appraise a subject like you, and yes, we do not have a name for this magic, but I call it appraisal. I know, unoriginal, but that is basically what the magic does, Violetta answered with a chuckle. All wand makers and foci makers use this magic? Harry asked in a surprised tone, for Violetta to chuckle at him. I will answer that question after you answer mine, Violetta corrected him as she raised her finger. How did your magical core turn into that? Violetta asked as she pointed at his chest with her finger. Harry internally cursed for wasting a question. I was performing a ritual and I triggered something during the ritual, I don't know what happened, but my magical core turned into this. I call this reactor. Harry finished his explanation and Violetta stared at him in complete awe. Fascinating. Violetta breathed out as she wrapped her fingers together. It took her a few more seconds to finally regain her bearings. As for the question you asked, the answer is no. My magic will definitely vary from other wand makers or foci makers as my magic has been developed by the Beauvais family throughout the years, but the end result is almost the same, and yes, the magic you copied is my family magic, but I don't think you are planning to become a wand maker, especially with all that power under your command, so I don't mind you using my family magic, Violetta answered dismissively. Harry nodded his head in understanding. He also realized the fact that if Violetta wanted, she could have created a heap of trouble for him since technically he stole her family magic. Violet was showing him a lot of goodwill and felt glad that he decided to play her game, instead of trying to attack her. Thank you for letting me use your family magic, Harry thanked her in a genuine tone. She couldn't have done anything to stop him from using her magic, except for informing the Aurors, but that was beside the point. Violetta simply waved her hand with a smile. Now tell me, what can you do with this reactor of yours? Violetta asked, her eyes practically shining with interest. You are going to keep everything to yourself, aren't you? Harry asked as he stared at her intently. Instead of answering his question, she pulled out her 11 fur and dragon heartstring wand and pointed it toward the roof. Harry immediately realized what she was about to do. I, Violetta Beauvais, swear on magic that I won't reveal the contents of this meeting between myself and Hadrian Potter to anyone in any form without his express permission. Violetta swore and the tip of her wand glowed, signifying the fact that the oath was in place. Harry felt a bit relieved on the inside. It seems that Violetta might be able to answer his questions. Is that sufficient? Violetta asked, only for Harry to give her a nod. I wasn't expecting that all of a sudden, Lily blurted out, but right now, Harry decided to pay her no mind. I can perform wandless magic. I have tried to cast all the spells I know without my wand and I could easily cast all of them, Harry admitted without a trace of smugness in his voice. Violetta started to tremble as she continued to stare at him intently. Fascinating. Simply fascinating! Violetta exclaimed like a child while rocking on her feet giddily. Harry was a bit weirded out, but there was not much he could do. The things I can learn from. Violetta muttered wistfully as she placed her palm on her cheek, making Harry feel chills run down his spine. Can you tell me if someone can create an unbreakable contract with a fake name? Harry asked, getting back to the original question he wanted her to answer. Theoretically, it shouldn't be possible, but intent plays a big part when it comes to unbreakable vows, Violetta answered after a bit of thinking. Hadrian Potter, the last time we met I told you that I will be looking forward to your achievements. Now tell me, have you achieved anything groundbreaking? Violetta asked, making Harry think for a moment. I was able to conjure a lump of useless flesh, Harry answered, making Violetta nod her head. I admit, that's quite an achievement even though I don't care much about conjuration or transfiguration, but nonetheless, it's still quite a great achievement, Violetta admitted as she kept nodding her head. Now, ask away, Violetta offered. What will happen if someone enters my fake name into the Goblet of Fire? Will I be forced to participate thanks to the unbreakable contract? Harry asked without showing any outward reaction, but on the inside, he was feeling quite nervous. Ah! The Goblet of Fire, I haven't heard about that damned thing for quite some time. Now, instead of answering, I will give you something better. You see, my family, the House of Beauvais, originates from France, and France played a big part in the creation of the goblet. You see, my great-great-grandfather was quite heavily involved in the process, Violetta said with a longing smile on her face. Wait here, Violetta said and disappeared into the back of her shop. Harry was bubbling in excitement. He made the right choice by coming to her for information. After a couple of minutes, Violetta returned with an ancient-looking scroll in her hand. She practically shoved the scroll into his hands. Take that. You will find everything about the goblet in there, and from everything I mean everything, Violetta assured him with a creepy glint in her eyes. Thank you. This means a lot to me, Harry bowed a little to convey his gratitude. Now, I have a question, and depending on your answer, I have a request too, Violetta spoke and Harry simply gestured her to continue. Are you a parcel mouth? Violetta asked, only for Harry to give her a nod. Brilliant. Now, I have been able to acquire a bit of basilisk venom and I want to add that to your wand. Violetta quickly finished her request and after thinking for a bit, Harry pulled out his wand and handed it to her. Kukiku. When I am done modifying this wand, this will be my greatest work. This will be my legacy. Violetta exclaimed cheerfully as she accepted the wand. In the hands of someone like you, this wand is bound to create miracles. Kukiku. I can't wait to rub this fact in Garrick's face. Maybe, he will pop a vein or two in frustration. It would be a lovely sight to see. Violetta continued to mutter as she clutched the wand tightly in her hands. You have made me talk quite a bit today, you can leave now. I have other important things to deal with, Violetta said while doing a shooing motion at Harry. Without saying anything else, Violetta disappeared into the back of her shop, leaving a gobsmacked Harry. Harry shook his head and started to leave. She didn't even tell him when he should return to get his wand. He shook his head and stared at the scroll in his hand. I will be the creator of the second Elder Wand. He heard Violetta exclaim loudly from the back of her shop, making Harry freeze for a second. She believes that the Elder Wand is real, or at least, she believes it to be real, Harry mused internally as he finally walked out of her shop. Chapter 68, The Woman at Kamartaj. Kamartaj, Nepal, August 1, 1994. A woman was peacefully sleeping on her bed, but all of a sudden, her eyes snapped open and she sat up with a deep frown marring her face. She waved her hand in the air, lighting up the room, which in return, revealed the woman in all of her bald glory. The timeline was changing. She could feel it even though she didn't have the Eye of Agamotto on her person. She removed the duvet with a flick of her finger and climbed out of her bed. She grabbed her outer robe from the coat stand and put it on her back, and as soon as she did that, her pajamas transformed into her sorcerer robes. Without wasting any more time, she rushed toward her locker. That is where she kept the Eye of Agamotto when she wasn't using it. Image here. She unlocked the locker and grabbed the Eye of Agamotto from the stand before putting it around her neck. After that, she quickly made her way into her study, but not before grabbing a couple of potato chip packets. She sat down in front of her table and summoned a cup filled with tea with a wave of her hand. Even if the timeline was changing, the world wasn't getting destroyed anytime soon, so it would be a waste if she didn't treat herself to some tea and potato chips. She nodded her head in satisfaction and closed her eyes. She brought her arms near the Eye of Agamotto and green rings appeared around her hands. She moved her arms away and the Eye of Agamotto opened up, revealing the green glowing gem inside the Eye of Agamotto. It didn't take her long to find the origin of the shift in the timeline, Hadrian Potter, and her lips thinned in displeasure. Why did the boy have to awaken such a troublesome power even though this was probably the tamest power he could have awakened? She had seen him awaken different types of powers in different timelines. In one timeline he awakened a power that allowed him to turn himself into a dragon, and not only that, he could also turn others into dragons. That timeline was a mess and she was somewhat relieved that they weren't in that timeline. Then there was a timeline where he turned into a powerful demon and they had to lock him up. She shuddered at the thought of that timeline. He eventually returns and the things he did to the ones responsible for locking him away would even give Dormammu nightmares for eons. Then there was a timeline when he turned into an undead, and that was another timeline which shouldn't be discussed, ever. She released a tired sigh and dropped her arms. The green rings around her arms disappeared and the Eye of Agamotto closed up. She realized that this could have been much worse, but at the same time, she had also seen some timelines where Hadrian Potter never awakened any bullshit powers. It would have been much better if he never awakened any of these powers. Alas, there was not much she could do right now. Now, she could only suck it up and deal with it. With a grumpy look on her face, she tore open one of her chips packets and started to munch on them. After a few minutes, she finally started to calm down, and that is when she realized that Hadrian Potter wasn't seeking to destroy the world or humanity, yet. Yes, his morals might be skewed and questionable, but this Hadrian Potter is still someone who she can depend upon if Earth as a whole is ever in danger. A smile bloomed on her face as she decided to simply kick back and watch the show for the time being. She would also need to watch all the possible futures of this timeline so that she could know what to do and what not to do if she wanted to form an amicable relationship with Hadrian Potter. She looked outside the window. There were still a couple of hours before sunrise, but she did have a lot of work to do, so she decided to start right now without any more time, but before that, she needed to grab a lot more chips packets. Come on, Harry. Just one spar, Jacqueline whined like a spoiled little brat, only for Harry to roll his eyes at her in exasperation. Even after he told her his real name, she decided to keep calling him Harry, as according to her, Harry flowed out of her mouth more easily than Hadrian. Not that Harry cared either way as long as she was comfortable. He had been trying to read the scroll after returning from the market, but Jacqueline had been constantly bothering him for a spar since the two of them returned. Jackie, I am yet to get a hang of my power. I don't want you to end up as a bloody smear on a wall, Harry said drily while giving her an annoyed look. Ooh. You are worried about nothing. Jacqueline quickly dismissed his worries with a wave of her hand. Did Brittany tell you when she is going to arrive? Harry asked, trying to change the topic. So smooth. Jacqueline bit out drily, her voice thick with sarcasm. By the way, she said that she will arrive before lunch. She answered his question with a huff before she plopped down beside Harry with a grumpy look on her face. Fine. I will give up on the spar right now, but what are you reading? She asked as she slung her arm over his shoulder and pulled him closer. Harry flushed a bit when her breasts started to press on his shoulders, but he didn't show any outward reaction. I am trying to find out if the goblet could bind me with an unbreakable contract even with a fake name, since you didn't already know that. Harry bit back sarcastically, making Jacqueline huff. So, did you find anything? Jacqueline asked, completely ignoring the fact that Harry was trying to make fun of her. Though she was going to remember this and have her revenge on a later date. Yes, apparently, it is impossible for the goblet to form an unbreakable contract with a fake name, but I am trying to find if there is any way to get around that, Harry answered curtly, making Jacqueline hum thoughtfully. Apparently, the Goblet of Fire was created by the goblins, and even the wizards and witches of that era were quite aware of the fact that the goblins would do almost anything to get wizarding kind in trouble. So, the people overseeing the creation of Goblet made it impossible for the Goblet to create unbreakable contracts with a fake name. Thanks to the scroll, Harry also discovered a way to escape the unbreakable contract in case someone else entered his real name. After all, someone else might try to get you into trouble by entering your name in the Goblet. In the era when the Goblet of Fire was created, there used to be a lot of conflict between various wizarding families, so there was always a chance that someone might try to get someone from their rival family into trouble by entering their name. Hey! Don't you want eternal glory? Jacqueline asked in an amused tone when her eyes caught the eternal glory part. Name one champion since the tournament started, Harry told her without even bothering to look at her, making Jacqueline glare at him. Fuck you, Harry, Jacqueline growled as she lowered her head on his shoulder. How about you take a break? Jacqueline began to speak, but Harry cut her off. I am going to toss you in that yard and douse you in ice-cold water if you are going to ask for a spar, Harry said in a no-nonsense tone, making Jacqueline mutter about how unfun he was being right now. A package is here. All of a sudden Jacqueline spoke up, and just as she finished, several owls flew inside the house carrying a huge package. The owls landed on the table with the package tied to their legs. Jacqueline stood up and started to untie the package from the owls. The owls hooted before flying out of the house one by one. This is addressed to you, kiddo, Jacqueline said, pointing at the package and the letter. Harry couldn't help but raise his eyebrows in question as he started to wonder who could have sent him a letter and a package. Well, there were a lot of people who could have sent him letters and packages since he is world famous and today is his birthday, but this is the first time he received something like this on his birthday. I also wonder why no one has ever sent you a birthday card until now. Before your Hogwarts letter, you never received any letter from anyone, and I find it really surprising that nobody sent you anything before that, especially with how famous you are, Lily pointed out in a thoughtful tone. Something to ponder, I guess, but now I have a package and a letter to deal with, Harry said as he pointed his finger at the letter and cast a diagnostic charm to check if the letter was safe to open or not. Jacqueline rolled her eyes at his excessive paranoia. If there was something harmful in the letter, then the owl would have failed to fly through her wards. When Harry was sure that the letter was safe to open, he finally grabbed the letter, and he would have to admit, his curiosity was piqued when he saw that it was his godfather, who sent him this letter. Chapter 69, The Godfather Estranged. Harry. I don't think you know me, but I am Sirius Black. You might have read about me in the papers, but in case you didn't, I will try my best to explain everything to you. Now you must be wondering why I am telling you all of this, or why I am trying to reach out to you in the first place, but believe me, I have an answer for that. It might sound a bit weird, but I am your godfather. I know, it is hard to believe, but that is the truth. Now, you must be wondering why you had to grow up without me if I am godfather, and once again, I have an answer for that. I was wrongfully imprisoned after that fateful Halloween night. They shoved me inside prison without bothering to give me a trial. I am not trying to gain your sympathy, nor am I asking you to forgive me. I am simply asking for you to understand. That night, instead of choosing to take care of you, I chose vengeance, and I paid for that dearly. The thing is, I failed you. I failed James. I failed Lily. At the end of the day, everything is simply an excuse, but the fact remains that I failed every one of you. I am sorry for failing you. I know any apology I give you would seem hollow, as I don't have anything to show for it. Ha! I think you have had enough of my moping by now, so I won't waste any more of your time. I am not asking you to forgive me, but the reason I am sending you this letter is because I am simply asking for a chance. I know I can't change the past, but I still want to be a part of your life, even though you probably don't need me in your life anymore. I promise. A chance is all I am asking for. I will understand if you don't want to meet me or you don't want anything to do with me, but in case, if you do want to give me a chance or meet me, please send me a letter through the goblins. They know how to reach me. You would just need to give me a date and I will be there to meet you. Now, let's move on from morbid topics. Happy birthday, Harry. I wish I could be there with you, but I realized that it would have been rude of me if I showed up unannounced. Well, if you haven't already opened the package that came along with the letter, it's your birthday present. I hope you like it. In case you have already opened the package, I am not trying to buy you off with gifts. I have missed so many of your birthdays and Christmas Eves already, and I simply thought that you would like the gift I sent you. Once again, happy birthday, Harry. I hope you have a good day. Peace out. Your estranged godfather. Sirius Black / Harry read the letter for the second time, and he had to admit, his estranged godfather did a very good job of conveying his emotions through words. What do you think, Mom? Harry asked curiously as he slowly put down the letter. Jacqueline was thoughtful enough to give him some space after he told her that the letter was from his godfather. What I think is not important, son. What you think or want to do is more important, son, Lily answered in an amused tone. I want to give him a chance, Mom, Harry answered after a few moments of silence. Well then, there is your answer, Lily smiled brightly. You don't mind? I mean, are you all right with it? Harry asked warily. I told you before that I don't have anything against giving him a chance the last time we talked about him, and I still feel the same about him, Lily explained with a shrug. Alright. Now let's see what is the gift he thought I would like, Harry muttered to himself as he closed the letter and placed it back on the table. Are you done with the letter? Jacqueline asked curiously from the other side of the table. Yet. He was asking if I could give him another chance, and I have decided to give him a chance, Harry answered, and Jacqueline smiled at him brightly. That's really great, Harry. I mean, you have me and Brittany, but he is as close as someone can get to be a parent without being an actual parent, Jacqueline beamed at him. And I personally feel that he definitely deserves a chance. He couldn't take care of you because he was wrongfully imprisoned, Jacqueline explained as her mood went down a bit at the end. I know. That is why he is getting another chance, Harry bit out stiffly as he started to run his hand over the package while casting various diagnostic cams. His godfather might have been the one to send him the gift, but his godfather must have used some third party, most likely the goblins, to get the package over this side of the pond, which meant, a lot of people or beings came in contact with the damn thing. It is quite possible that someone among them could have done something to this package. Harry finally nodded his head in satisfaction and levitated the package in the air. I still can't believe my eyes, you know. The way you are using magic is making me think that I am probably dreaming, Jacqueline breathed while staring at Harry in complete awe and fascination. She was already looking forward to the day when Harry would bring the magical world down to his heel. That day, she will proudly tell everyone that she supported him from day one. Harry was destined for greatness and she would support him all the way, no matter what path he was going to take. Even right now I am having trouble believing it myself, Harry returned in an amused tone as he started to gently tear off the wrapping with a slow wave of his hand. His eyes grew wide in surprise when one end of the package was finally revealed. It was a fucking firebolt. His godfather sent him a fucking firebolt. Even though Harry wasn't a Quidditch fanatic, he loved flying. He loved flying, like a lot. He could fly without a broom, but the speed he could achieve with a broom couldn't be matched by the speed of his supported flight. Since he loved flying on a broom, like any other flying fanatic, he had obviously checked out the firebolt broom when it came out last year. He wanted to buy it so badly, but he ended up walking after he saw the price tag. He simply couldn't bring himself to spend 1,000 galleons on a broom no matter how much he wanted to buy it, and 1,000 galleons was only the price of the base model. Is that a freaking firebolt? Your godfather seems to be loaded. Jacqueline breathed out, looking extremely excited. Harry didn't miss the stars in her eyes. Apparently, Jacqueline wasn't just a dueling fanatic. That foolish man, Lily sighed tiredly. I should have expected something like this from him. Yeah, why not? Gift a 14-year-old a professional racing broom which can go up to 150 miles per hour within 10 seconds. Bah! Lily exclaimed in frustration as she threw up her hands in the air. I am going to have some serious words with him if I ever regain a body, Lily promised with a determined look on her face. Come on, Mom. Cut him some slack. This is a firebolt. Harry tried to get his estranged godfather off the hook. His godfather might have some problems, but Harry decided that he had some good points too. Of course, you are going to take his side. What is this with boys and their brooms? Lily exclaimed in exasperation. Fine, since you are asking me, I will go easy on him, but we are still going to have a talk, Lily assured him, making Harry realize that she wasn't going to budge from this. All right, Harry muttered as he finally unwrapped the package completely, revealing the broom. I don't want to hear that from you, Jackie. You could have probably bought a whole dozen of these things and it wouldn't have made a dent in your vaults, Harry retorted while giving her a pointed look. I asked my dad to buy me a firebolt, but he told me that I can get either a firebolt or a house, Jacqueline answered sullenly. It was an obvious choice. I couldn't handle his babying anymore, Jacqueline huffed as she crossed her hands in front of her chest. You are going to let me use that, right? Right? Jacqueline asked, looking hopeful. Harry simply smiled at her. Of course, Jackie, he said before he turned back toward the broom and once again started to cast diagnostic charms. Jacqueline couldn't stop herself from rolling her at him in exasperation. Sometimes, Harry could be excessively paranoid. Oh. This is the 87th firebolt, Harry said with a grin as he pointed at the golden registration number etched at the birch handle. Every firebolt was marked with a specific serial number. I can't wait to try out this baby, Harry added with a grin and grabbed the broom handle with his hands when he was finally satisfied that the broom was safe. Al. Jacqueline was about to exclaim something excitedly, but she stopped when the two of them heard someone step through the flue. That must be Brittany, which means it's already past noon, Jacqueline muttered, and Harry also reached the same conclusion even though he wasn't connected to the wards. His newfound genius shining through. Guys, where are you? Brittany called out from inside the house. Brittany, we are at the back. Jacqueline exclaimed loudly. Then she turned toward Harry and placed her hand beside her mouth. Are you going to tell her? Jacqueline asked, and Harry already knew what she was talking about. I am going to tell her about my reactor and my name. I have been an asshole to her for quite long, Harry answered. He didn't even need to think before answering. He had already made up his mind, and Jacqueline simply nodded her head in satisfaction. Brittany finally arrived at the back deck and froze as her eyes landed on the broom. You bought an expensive broom. Why am I not surprised? Brittany asked, looking displeased as she pushed up her glasses. This is a gift from my godfather, Harry argued back with a grin on his face. Ah! Brittany blinked. Ah! I never considered that. Brittany nodded her head with a no-nonsense look on her face. By the way, happy birthday, Harry, Brittany said while approaching him with a bright smile on her face. She wrapped her arms around him and pulled him into her embrace. Thanks, Brittany, Harry said softly as he hugged her back. After a few more seconds, the two of them finally separated when Jacqueline fake coughed in her hand. By the way, Harry, I left your gift in the drawing room, Brittany said, making Harry smile. That can wait. There are a few things we need to talk about, right? Harry revealed as he sat down and pulled down Brittany to sit down beside him. All right, Brittany muttered with a wary nod, looking a bit confused, but she still followed his lead and sat down beside him. She turned a bit to glance at Jacqueline, and when she noticed the serious look on the older girl's face, she gulped nervously. She realized that it must be something really serious since the two of them were acting like that. All right. First of all, Harry is not my name. My name is Hadrian. With that, Harry started to reveal some of his closely kept secrets to Brittany, making her eyes go wide in shock and surprise. Chapter 70, The Man in Mansion. X Mansion, Salem Center, New York, August 1, 1994. For the common folk, Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters was a completely normal private boarding school. Well, maybe not normal since they only accepted gifted children, but the common folk had no idea how wrong they were. Yes, the accepted students were most definitely gifted, but not in the way the common folk believed. What the common folk didn't know was the fact that each and every resident of the X Mansion were mutants, also known as Homo Superior or Homo sapiens Superior. Mutants are basically humans, born with an enhanced genome known as X gene, which gives them superpowers when triggered. Now, mutations normally manifest themselves during puberty, often as a result of a traumatic event or a stressful situation. Though there had been some instances when mutants exhibited their mutations at birth, on the other hand, there had been some others who did not manifest their mutations until adulthood. Charles Xavier, the owner of X Mansion and the person in charge of this school, was currently making his way through the sub-basement level. Following the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, which led to the dissolution of Division X, he decided to turn his mansion into a school and a safe haven for mutants. In 1965, he officially opened Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters with Hank McCoy, one of his closest friends, assisting him. It wasn't a smooth ride for the school, as during the Vietnam War, many students and staff were drafted into the military, ultimately leaving the school unable to function. Somewhere around the early 1970s, Xavier's school was defunct, and Charles Xavier reverted his mansion to a private residence once again. Living with Hank, Charles also fell into a period of grief and depression when he used the serum used by his friend to allow him to regain his ability to walk. Thankfully, Charles Xavier was somehow able to recover from this phase and the school was once again re-established. The school was finally up and running well by 1979. So, what's the agenda tonight, Professor? Are you looking for anything specific? Jean Grey, who was walking behind Charles Xavier, asked with a smile on her face. Nothing like that, Jean. I simply want to do a routine check, Charles answered back with a smile. The two of them finally arrived in front of the Cerebro room, and the biometric lock was whirring, noticing their arrival. The biometric lock started to scan Charles's eye and the door finally unlocked with a loud clang. Welcome, Professor X, the door chimed when the door was finally open. Cerebro is a machine built by Charles Xavier with the help of a couple of his friends, Hank McCoy and Eric Lenshare. The machine is used by Charles Xavier to amplify his telepathic ability in order to observe all the mutants and humans throughout the world. The Cerebro could also be used to locate any individual as well. Do you want me to leave, Professor? Jean asked as Charles Xavier, also known as Professor X. Charles, who was about to enter the Cerebro room while seated in his custom mechanical wheelchair, stopped after hearing her question. He turned his head a bit to look at her. "You are free to join me, Jean," he offered gently, making the said girl smile as she followed Charles into the Cerebro room. The massive room lit up with a dim glow and the platform kept lighting up as the two of them kept moving forward. The two of them finally arrived at the edge of the platform and Charles picked up the Cerebro helmet from the table. Without saying anything else, he put on the helmet before turning on the machine with a simple mental command. Their surroundings dimmed as their surroundings started to fill with small white humanoid figures with some rare red humanoid figures mixed in. The white figures represented normal humans while the red humanoid figures represented mutants. I am sensing a new mutant, quite a powerful one too, Charles muttered to himself as he started to concentrate on the newest mutant he found in New York. "That's him," Charles breathed out as a single red humanoid figure appeared in front of the duo. "What is his power, Professor?" Jean asked curiously as she leaned forward, making Charles frown. "Weird. I can't sense anything about him. His mind feels somewhat guarded," Charles muttered thoughtfully. "I think he might be a telepath. He must be unconsciously protecting his mind," Charles concluded after a few moments of silence. "Is he somewhere nearby?" Jean asked with a hint of concern in her voice. If he was a telepath, then they needed to find him as quickly as possible. As a new mutant, he wouldn't know how to control his powers and he might end up hurting everyone around him. She started to relate her own past to this newly awakened mutant. "Yes. He lives in New York City," Charles answered absent-mindedly as he continued to inspect the newly awakened mutant. "We can't allow Eric to get his claws into this boy or he will gain a powerful subordinate," Charles said as he turned back to look at Jean, who nodded her head in understanding. "I will grab Scott and Aurora," Jean said while nodding her head as she walked out of the Cerebro room, leaving Charles Xavier to ponder his options. There were two white humanoid figures near the newly awakened mutant, but surprisingly, their minds were protected too, even though the protection around one of the minds was a bit weaker. Was this mutant responsible for protecting the minds of these two humans too? Charles tapped his chin with a pondering look on his face. If he focused all of Cerebro's power, then he could pierce their protection, but doing that might hurt them severely. Jacqueline's pad. All of a sudden, Harry perked up when he felt a mental probe brush against his shields. "How the fuck?" Harry questioned with a frown and closed the book in his hand with a snap as he slowly stood up. There was nobody around him except for Brittany and Jacqueline, and neither of them knew legilimency. For fuck's sake, neither of them were looking in his direction. Then all of a sudden, the two of them perked up too. "Fuck! I felt a mental probe!" Jacqueline exclaimed, completely outraged. "You are not the only one." Brittany closed her own book as she stood up too. Harry's discussion with Brittany didn't go that well, but she admitted that she will eventually get over it. She was simply annoyed by the fact that Harry couldn't trust them with his real name. Aside from that, it has been a good day for him. He got to discover quite a few things more about his newfound powers, and he also got to test his new broom, much to Lily's displeasure. "I am still feeling the probes," Harry muttered, only for Jacqueline and Brittany to nod their heads. "Someone might be trying to scry you," Lily suggested, and Harry immediately turned toward Jacqueline. "Is your house warded against scrying?" Harry asked hurriedly. "Of course, it is," Jacqueline confirmed with a huff. "I think we should get out of here," Brittany suggested fearfully. Someone was trying to continuously probe their mind and it was obviously scaring her. "Let's head back to my family mansion," Jacqueline suggested quickly. "All right." After thinking for a bit, Harry nodded his head in agreement, making Brittany sigh in relief. He didn't even know how this person was reaching out to them, and there was no way Harry could find the location of this person. So, there wasn't much he could do right now. "Good. Let's go then." Jacqueline nodded her head as she started to make her way toward the flue, followed by Harry and Brittany. Jacqueline arrived in front of the flue and tossed some flue powder into the fireplace and waited for the fire to turn green. As soon as the fire was green, she stepped inside the flue and called out the name of her family mansion. Moments later, she was gone. "Ladies first," Harry offered gentlemanly, only for Brittany to give him a weird look, but she still accepted the offer and stepped into the flue after she tossed some flue powder into the fireplace. She also called out the name of the Harper family mansion, and moments later, she also disappeared into flames. As soon as Brittany was gone, Harry scowled unhappily as he grabbed some flue powder. He hated the fact he was running away, again. He clenched his fists in anger. What was the use of having so much power if he had to run away? I know how it feels, Hadrian, but sometimes, running away is the only option, Lily said in a bitter tone, making him bite his lip in anger. Blood started to trickle down from his lips as Harry continued to hatefully glare at the ceiling. You are right, Harry sighed in defeat and relaxed his body. But, whoever you are, I am going to make you pay, Harry vowed internally. That's it, son, Lily beamed at him proudly. Harry sighed again, and just when he was about to toss the flow powder into the fireplace, his senses flared up, and he turned around only to find the weirdest sight he had ever seen. I have to admit, nice reflexes. Chapter 71, The Woman in Bald, I/A/N, yesterday, I forgot to post artworks with the chapter. Here you go. Images here. Equals 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 equals. I have to admit, nice reflexes, the figure of a bald woman, dressed in yellow robes, said as she walked out of a sparkling portal in all of her bald glory. That was probably not the best way I could have greeted you. My bad, but I promise you, I am not here to harm you, the woman said as she raised her hands in the air as the universal sign of surrender. And I should trust you, why? Harry asked the weird woman. His mind was already going into overdrive with the number of questions popping inside his mind with each passing second, and then all of a sudden, he felt something inside of him. His reactor started to produce another type of energy, which he wasn't familiar with, but somehow he knew that he could create the portal behind the weird woman with this new energy his reactor was producing. Somehow, he also knew how to create the portal even though he had never done it before. More questions continued to pop into his mind, but even with his newfound genius, he couldn't find the answers he was looking for. You learned how to create these portals, didn't you? The woman asked softly with a knowing look on her face, surprising Harry once again. I understand you have a lot of questions and I am willing to answer all of them, or at least I will try to answer all of them, the woman slowly explained, but she didn't move from her initial spot, nor did she try to make any sudden movements. How can I trust you? I don't even know who you are. Harry bit out with a sneer, making the woman smile at him, but her smile wasn't condescending. Are you the one trying to enter my mind? Harry asked as he narrowed his eyes at her. No. I am not the one who did that, the woman denied with a straight look on her face. Look, we can keep going back and forth or we could sit down and have a chat, the woman offered, and to be honest, Harry didn't know what to do. The paranoid part of his mind was telling him to run away, but the other part of his mind was whispering all the reasons why he should listen to her. Mom, Harry called out to his mom. He knew that he could always depend on his mom to never lead him astray. Listen to her. Let's see what she has to say. It is clear that there is no hiding from her since she was able to breach powerful wards like nothing, Lily answered stiffly after a few moments of silence. All right, Harry agreed to her suggestion. Fine, let's talk, but I want my friends to be here. Harry pushed forward his condition and the woman seemed to think for a bit before she finally nodded her head in agreement. Harry stepped aside and tossed the flow powder in his hands into the fireplace. He decided to wait for the flames to turn green and Harry stepped forward, but he didn't turn his back completely to the woman. He called out the name of the Harper family mansion and the world turned around him until he was staring at the drawing room of the Harper family mansion. Jackie, Brittany, you there? Harry called out only for Jacqueline to appear in front of the flue. After a few moments, she sighed in relief as soon as her eyes found him. Harry, are you all right? Why aren't you here? By the way, the probing stopped, Jacqueline gushed out hurriedly. He could clearly hear the worry in her voice. Now that Jacqueline mentioned it, only now did he realize that the probing was gone. Apparently, his mind was so busy thanks to the weird woman's arrival, he didn't even notice the probing disappear. Yeah, I am all right. Where is Brittany, by the way? Harry asked. I knocked her out. She was freaking out since you weren't coming and I didn't want her to wake up the rest of my house along with my parents, Jacqueline explained. I don't want my father to wake up right now. He will start fussing unnecessarily, Jacqueline added bitterly. I see. Harry muttered as he nodded his head in understanding. By the way, can you come over? Look, it might sound weird, but we have a guest. Harry didn't even get to finish what he was saying before Jacqueline cut him off. Guest? Who the fuck are you? What the fuck did you do to Harry? Jacqueline growled in anger and Harry almost rolled his eyes at her. It's still me. Here, Harry said and conjured a pair of glasses without any gesture. I guess, but you might be under the influence of the Imperious curse. I am calling the Aurors. Jacqueline exclaimed, but before she could back out, Harry started to speak again. Jackie, it's me, and I am not under the influence of the Imperious curse. Look, just summon Morsi and tell her to contact your father or the Aurors in case you don't report back within an hour, Harry suggested, making Jacqueline freeze, and after some contemplation, she gave him a reluctant nod. All right, Jackie. I am stepping back so you can come through, Harry added with a sigh and pulled his head out of the fireplace. Your friend is smart, the woman praised when Harry finally turned back toward her. I just hope that she comes through instead of calling the Aurors, Harry sighed. Don't worry, they won't be able to catch me, and I know she won't call them, the woman said with an assured look on her face, which Harry found a bit weird but didn't comment on it. By the way, did you stop the one who was trying to mentally probe us? Harry asked curiously. Not exactly, but I placed a barrier around the house to make it impossible for him to continue his actions, the woman answered with a smile, but there was a vicious glint in her eyes. Moments later, the flue flared up and green flames spewed out of the fireplace. Jacqueline appeared out of the fire with her wand held out. As soon as her eyes landed on their guest, she fired a purple curse at her. Harry immediately recognized the curse as the skin-melting curse and his eyes grew wide, but the woman simply conjured a yellow astral fan in her hand and swatted the spell away with extreme ease. Please don't do that, the woman requested, but she didn't dismiss the fan in her hand. Once again, Harry knew how to create the fan and recreate the same feat. Fine. What the fuck do you want from Harry, Baldy? Jacqueline asked with a huff as she kept pointing her wand at the woman, but didn't try to attack her, again. While the woman didn't seem to be bothered by the name-calling, Harry didn't miss the twitch on the woman's face when Jacqueline called her Baldy. X-Mansion, Salem City. Meanwhile, back at the X-Mansion, Charles Xavier was constantly monitoring the trio with the help of his cerebro, but he was completely taken aback when all of a sudden the two normal humans disappeared one by one. Charles immediately concluded that the mutant possessed some sort of teleportation ability along with some telepathic ability. It was rare for mutants to have multiple powers, but he had seen this before. Even though Charles was keeping an eye on the trio, he was paying the most attention to the mutant, so he never looked at the normal humans that closely, and now that the two of them were teleported somewhere else, there was a very small chance he could find them again among the other normal humans. Charles slightly shook his head in disappointment before he decided to pay his full attention to the mutant. He couldn't afford to lose him or Eric might get to him. Then all of a sudden Charles winced in pain as the mutant he was keeping an eye on disappeared. Charles tried to find him again, but once again he winced in pain, but this time the pain was more intense. His hands shot up to his head as he grabbed his head in pain. Charles frantically shook his head. Did this mutant somehow notice him? Was this mutant somehow attacking him? Charles didn't have any answers to that, so he decided to try again, but as soon as he did, he slouched down as he grunted in pain. This time, the pain was way more intense than before. After a whole minute, Charles finally regained his bearings. Charles wasn't foolish. Not in the slightest. So, he didn't miss the fact that he was only being attacked when he tried to find the mutant. Charles knew he couldn't back out. He couldn't allow Eric to get his hands on this mutant. Since he couldn't find the mutant on his own, he simply decided to wait for Jean, Aurora, and Scott to reach the location where the mutant was. There was a chance that the mutant might have already teleported away, but they had to try. Maybe they were going to have better luck than him. Jacqueline's pad. I haven't been called that until now, the woman muttered as she rubbed one of her hands on top of her shiny bald head. Harry's lips twitched at her tone. She didn't look like she felt insulted, but from the twitch he saw on her face, he was sure that she was at least slightly annoyed. Why don't we sit down so that we can finally start something productive? Harry suggested as he clapped his hands while glancing at Jacqueline. The said girl gave a stiff nod, but she didn't lower her hand. Harry was glad that she agreed to sit down and chat without any more spells flying. Chapter 72, The Woman in Bald, 2. A/N, I didn't want to do this, but I realized this was necessary. Some of you had some questions and I will try to explain them to the best of my abilities. 1. Why didn't Harry call the Aurors? That would have been foolish, especially when the Ancient One said that she simply wanted to talk. Harry obviously didn't trust her, but she never gave him a reason to mistrust her. Additionally, Harry wanted answers and the Ancient One offered his answers. 2. Why did Harry call Jacqueline? Jacqueline is weaker than Harry and Harry also knew that. There is no way Jacqueline could have done anything, but Harry simply wanted to inform Morsi and not Jacqueline. He couldn't exactly tell the Ancient One that he wanted to tell Morsi about his situation, so he used a roundabout way to inform Morsi. 3. What Harry wanted to achieve by informing Morsi? Harry knew he couldn't escape. If the woman could breach through such powerful wards, then she could have easily found him, so Harry wanted Morsi to inform the Aurors in case something happened to him. Unfortunately, he had to put Jacqueline at risk, but it was a risk he had to take without revealing his hand. I know the Ancient One could have wiped the floor with the whole Macusa on her own, but Harry didn't know that. 4. Is there any other reason why Harry wanted to call his friends? First of all, Harry wanted to see what the woman was going to do if he said that he wanted some of his friends to be present. If the woman disagreed, then the woman probably had some nefarious agenda, and if the woman agreed, then either she believed that she could defeat all of them, or she never had any intention to fight in the first place. I hope I was able to satisfy some of the doubts you had from the last chapter. If you want, you are free to ask more questions, and I am always available on my Discord server. You said, you have answers, Harry stated as he sat down on the opposite side of the table with a coffee cup in his hands. The woman took a small sip from her own cup and scrunched her face a bit in distaste. I was right. Coffee doesn't suit me. The woman snapped her fingers and the liquid inside the cup was replaced by green tea, surprising Jacqueline. Once again, Harry out of the blue knew how she did that and how to replicate the feat. Even though he was feeling extremely giddy for being able to learn something with a single look, at the same time, he was feeling frustrated as he had no idea what was happening to him and what were the limits of his powers, or if there was any price he would need to pay on a later date for these powers. How did you do that? Jacqueline gasped in surprise as the wand she was still pointing at the woman faltered. It was magic. The woman answered innocently, making Jacqueline's eyebrows twitch in annoyance. The woman took a small sip of her tea and hummed in satisfaction. Let's start with the introductions. I am known as the Ancient One. The woman introduced herself, only for Harry to frown at her. You don't look that ancient, Harry pointed out, and Jacqueline helpfully nodded her head in agreement. I might look like this, but I was born in April 1316, the woman answered calmly, completely unbothered by the fact that they were talking about her age. That's impressive. Harry admitted with a nod of his head. You don't believe her, do you? Jacqueline asked with a scoff, only for Harry to roll his shoulders dismissively. She doesn't have a reason to lie to us, especially when she wants us to trust her, Harry explained nonchalantly before turning back toward the Ancient One. Don't you? Harry asked, making the woman smile at him. Yes, you are right. I do not have any reasons for lying to you, the woman admitted. I want to form an amicable relationship with you, so lying to you would be counterproductive. If there is something I don't want to tell you, then I will simply refuse to answer, she explained calmly before taking another from her cup. Well, I am Harry Potter, but I guess you already knew that, and this is one of my best friends, Jacqueline Harper. Harry introduced himself and Jacqueline. I also know your real name if you are wondering, the woman pointed out dismissively, which seemed to surprise Jacqueline, but Harry was already expecting them. If a woman can ignore the wards around Jacqueline's house like they were nothing, then the woman was anything but normal. What are you? I know you are not a witch because the energy you use to cast spells is not like the magic we use to cast our spells, Harry asked as he wanted to know what sort of energy his reactor was producing right now. I am a sorcerer and I hold the title of the Sorcerer Supreme, which also makes me the leader of the Masters of Mystic Arts, the woman calmly explained. The Masters of Mystic Arts is an order of sorcerers who are committed to protecting the earth from mystical threats. The Masters of Mystic Arts was founded by Agamotto, the first Sorcerer Supreme, some thousands of years ago, and since then, the Sorcerer Supremes and the Masters of Mystic Arts have been protecting this world from mystical threats. The woman would have continued her explanation, but Harry decided to interrupt her. That's all well and good, but you still haven't answered my question, and what the hell do you want from me? Harry asked impatiently. It was fascinating to learn that there was a group that was protecting this world from mystical threats. They were certainly a dedicated bunch and he would love to know more about them, but he was not in the mood right now. I was getting to that, the woman huffed as she threw Harry an annoyed look. It was Agamotto, the first Sorcerer Supreme, who discovered the existence of the other dimensions, and following that, he also found a way to draw power from these dimensions to create magical spells. The woman finished and took a small sip from her cup as she decided to wait for Harry and Jacqueline to digest the information she gave them. So, you are saying that you are drawing power from these dimensions to cast spells? Harry repeated as he nodded his head in understanding. Correct. The Ancient One confirmed with a stiff nod. This is fucking bullshit, Harry. You can't believe all the shit she is spouting out of her mouth. Ancient orders protecting this world for thousands of years. Come on. Tell us something more believable. Jacqueline huffed in outrage as she raised both of her hands in the air. I do not care if you believe me or not. I am not here for you. In the matter of grand schemes, you aren't even mentioned in the footnote, but I am here for him, the Ancient One stated as it was a matter of fact, making Jacqueline gape at the scale of the insult. Please don't insult her, Harry requested stiffly, making the Ancient One roll her eyes at him. I didn't insult her. I simply stated facts, the Ancient One retorted, looking completely unbothered. I knew that you would feel more comfortable if she was here. That is why she is here, the Ancient One added dismissively, making Harry wince, but he could understand where she was coming from. He turned toward Jacqueline, who was staring down at her hands, which were clutching her clothes. I know I am nothing compared to him. I already know that he is destined for greatness, but I am still his friend and I won't allow anyone to manipulate him, Jacqueline growled angrily as she glared at the Ancient One, making the woman smile widely. Meanwhile, Harry was staring at Jacqueline in complete surprise. He had no idea that Jacqueline held him in such high regard. That's what I wanted to hear. I can give you enough proof afterward about everything I told you, but for time being, please consider everything I am telling the two of you to be the truth, or I believe it to be the truth, the Ancient One explained softly. So, you were testing her and you wanted me to know what she thinks about me, right? Harry asked, but it wasn't a question and even Jacqueline knew that from his tone. Even though Jacqueline hid it well, she was mortified over the fact that Harry now knew what she thought about him and she was outraged at the woman. Yes. Moving on, you asked me what I wanted from you. I don't want anything excessive. I simply want to form an amicable relationship between the two of us, the Ancient One answered. Now, I did promise you answers. The Ancient One trailed off. Have you ever heard the term mutant? She asked after a small pause. Both Harry and Jacqueline shook their heads. Mutants are basically humans born with an extra genome called the X gene. This X gene gives them unique powers, the Ancient One wanted to continue, but from the look on Harry's face, she realized that she no longer needed to. His mind was terrifyingly sharp. You are saying that I am a mutant and my X gene is responsible for giving me all these powers, Harry stated, only for the Ancient One to nod her head in agreement. Charles Xavier, or otherwise known as Professor X, is the name of the man who was trying to probe your minds. He is one of these mutants and he is an extremely powerful telepath. He has this machine that allows him to locate mutants so that he could bring them to his school. There is more to that, but I will leave you up to that to discover on your own, the Ancient One answered one of the questions Harry was yet to ask. Right now, as we are speaking, they are flying in this direction. They won't find you as I have erected a barrier, but I can lower the barrier if you do want to meet them, the Ancient One offered. Harry shook his head in denial after a bit of thinking. No. I won't be meeting them here or now. I will seek them out when I am ready to meet them, Harry stated, and the Ancient One nodded her head in understanding. Now, what else can you tell me about my powers? Harry asked as he leaned forward on the table. I can tell you, or I can teach you everything I know. Obviously, the latter offer is not going to be free, the Ancient One revealed with a smile. There it is. So, what do you want from me in return for your tutelage? Harry asked mockingly, but he was genuinely considering accepting the offer inside his mind. Nothing much. I want you to show up whenever Earth as a whole is in threat, the Ancient One answered, making Harry's eyes go wide for a second. That's it? Harry asked incredulously. Of course. What else did you think? Did you think I am going to ask you to join the Masters of Mystic Arts? Or did you think I am going to ask you not to kill anyone? The Ancient One asked in an amused tone, and Harry had to admit, for a moment he thought that she might ask him to join the Masters of Mystic Arts, or she might ask him to spare his enemies so that they could be redeemed. If the woman had dared to suggest the latter condition, then he would have tossed her out of her house. I can do that, Harry nodded his head in agreement, as if Earth exploded, he would also go along with the Earth. Marvelous. Now, I extend an invitation to both of you to Camartage, the Ancient One gushed out as she opened a portal behind her with a wave of her hand. I don't know, but if you want to go then I will follow, Jacqueline said nervously as she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. But before Harry could give her an answer, the Ancient One spoke up. If you don't like it, then you can return whenever you want. After all, Harry already knows how to create these portals, don't you? The Ancient One asked Harry while giving him an innocent look. Harry sighed. It would be useless to lie. It was clear that the woman knew a lot of things about his powers. Yes, I know, Harry admitted with a nod of his head before he stood up. Excellent. Now please follow me. The Ancient One exclaimed as she clapped her hands before entering the portal. Chapter 73, The Boy Who Trained, 2. Kathmandu, Nepal. Welcome to Kamartaj, the Ancient One declared dramatically as she held her arms wide. Jacqueline stared at the massive property in awe and fascination while Harry simply took in the view with a calm look on his face. They could see a lot of people milling around dressed in robes, and as soon as they noticed the Ancient One, they would approach her and greet her respectfully. You were at least telling the truth about you being their leader, Harry wondered aloud as he stared at the Ancient One nonchalantly. The Ancient One's lips twitched in irritation. You don't trust anyone, do you? The Ancient One asked drily, but all three of them knew that it was a rhetorical question. I have a really hard time trusting people, Harry admitted dismissively. There was no point in denying it since there was nothing for him to gain by hiding the truth. But you trust her and your other friend, don't you? The Ancient One asked, making Jacqueline perk up, but she pretended not to be listening to what the two of them were talking about. Yes, I do, but it didn't happen in a day or a year, Harry answered honestly, making Jacqueline flutter in joy, but she did her best to act normally. Then he turned toward the Ancient One and stared at her intently. Keep proving that everything you told me is the truth and I might start trusting you too, Harry added magnanimously. That is exactly what I am planning to do, the Ancient One agreed. This is where I live. The Ancient One stopped in front of a big wooden building. The wooden door slid open with a wave of her hand, and just when the three of them were about to enter the building, Jacqueline stopped in her tracks and smacked her hands on her face. Fuck. I forgot to tell Morsi that I am all right. Jacqueline exclaimed in alarm. Harry snapped his fingers and a set of glowing digits appeared in the air. It hasn't been an hour yet, Jackie. Let's go back and inform Morsi and grab Brittany. She would keep sulking if we don't invite her, Harry quickly suggested, making Jacqueline nod at him with a smile on her face. Excuse us, we will be back in a couple of minutes, Harry said to the Ancient One, who gave him an understanding nod. Harry raised his hands in front of him and started to rotate one of his hands while holding out his other hand. A sparkling portal, leading to the drawing room of the Harper family mansion, started to form in the air. Jacqueline stared at the circle in complete shock as Harry was able to get past the strongest wards someone could buy with close to no effort. Not bad for a first try, wouldn't you say? Harry asked the Ancient One, who simply gave him a bland look. Yes, not bad. Not bad. The Ancient One forced herself to speak those words. She felt like she had been slapped. It had taken her 3 days to learn how to create portals, and she had to keep using the sling rings in the following months, but the boy simply learned the spell after watching it once. This world is so unfair, she whined inside her mind. Please, Harry, you gotta teach me how to do that, Jacqueline practically begged, making Harry chuckle at her antics. I will try my best to teach you. Harry accepted her request with a grin, even though he wasn't sure if Jacqueline could use the spell or not, as she wasn't drawing power from other dimensions. With that said, Harry stepped into the portal followed by Jacqueline, and the portal closed behind them, leaving the Ancient One standing at the door of her house. The Ancient One released a tired sigh. Dealing with the boy was harder than she was expecting it to be. His mind was terrifyingly sharp and he was quickly catching on to her. She wouldn't be surprised if he had already realized that she wanted to avoid killing him. There were several reasons why she couldn't kill the boy or try to get rid of him in some manner. First of all, fate had already decreed that the boy was important in the grand scheme of things, so killing him would make fate displeased, very displeased, and then she would have to step in to kill Tom Marvolo Riddle aka Voldemort from starting World War III. Secondly, it would be a pain in the ass to kill him in the first place. There were a couple of ways to kill him. She could portal him straight into the Mariana Trench, the surface of the sun, or into space. He would die even though doing any of the above would trigger his mother's protection, and there have been some timelines where he was able to survive being tossed into the bottom of the ocean, being sent to the surface of the sun, or being shoved into space. And when he returned, it was a fucking shit show. She could try to seal him, but once again that wouldn't work, as he would learn any spell she would cast on him after watching it only once. She could try to knock him out and then seal him, but once again that would trigger his mother's protection and she would be shafted. Then there was the fact that Hadrian Potter wasn't evil. Yes, he wasn't anywhere close to being a paragon of justice, but he was still someone she could depend upon in times of crisis. Greetings, Sorcerer Supreme. Someone greeted her, but already knew who it was. She had seen it happen. She turned her head to find one of her students, Caecilius, a student who would betray her in the future if she didn't do anything drastic to change the future. Caecilius, the Ancient One said as she gave him a nod of approval. I heard you brought some new outsiders, Caecilius said, and the Ancient One simply hummed in acknowledgement. Caecilius wasn't against outsiders or anything, but as one of the students of the Ancient One, he was interested in the people the Ancient One herself was interested in. Yes, I have already taught the one I am planning to take as my student how to create portals, the Ancient One revealed before her gaze sharpened. Caecilius, whatever you do, do not try to make an enemy of my newest student, the Ancient One warned him as she continued to stare at him intently, making him frown a bit. I wasn't planning to, in the first place, Caecilius argued back, making the Ancient One hum for the second time. I am simply interested to meet my new fellow disciple, Caecilius explained, making the Ancient One smile at him. Caecilius, paths to hell are paved with good intentions. Always remember that. The one I am taking in as my student has the greatest potential in mystic arts I have ever seen. His talent and potential are more than all of ours combined, the Ancient One revealed. Caecilius' eyes grew wide in surprise. He never thought he would ever hear such a compliment coming from the Ancient One. Now, he was even more interested in meeting his fellow disciple. Such high praise coming from someone like the Ancient One obviously meant something. Caecilius opened his mouth to say something, but he caught his words in his mouth when a portal started to form right in front of them. Moments later, the portal finally opened, revealing a group of 3. Caecilius was quite surprised when he noticed how young they were, though he started to wonder which one among the 3 was going to be his fellow disciple as the Ancient One told him that she was taking in only one student. Harry, this is Caecilius. He is currently learning under me. You will be learning beside him, the Ancient One explained, making the boy in the middle nod his head in understanding. The group of 3 stepped out of the portal and the portal closed beside them. Nice to meet, Caecilius. I am Harry Potter, Harry said as he extended his hand toward Caecilius. The man accepted the gesture and shook his hand. To be honest, Caecilius didn't know what to think about Harry, but for the time being, he decided to trust the Ancient One's judgment. Having talent and potential didn't translate into skill. Caecilius let go of Harry's hand, and that is when Caecilius got a good look at Harry's hand. Harry wasn't wearing sling rings. The boy was able to create a portal without sling rings. It was quite an impressive feat, as Caecilius still needed to use sling rings to amplify his spells. He reluctantly admitted, there was some truth in his mentor's words, and this only made him more excited about his fellow disciple. Caecilius, why don't you go and prepare some tea and snacks for our guests while I show them around? The Ancient One suggested, and knowing that he had been dismissed, Caecilius respectfully bowed his head before walking away. Come on, I will show you around. I promise you 3 are going to love this. The Ancient One said with a grin as she started to lead the trio into her house. Brittany decided to stick very close to Jacqueline and Harry as she was still very uncomfortable with everything going on, but she trusted her friends, and that is why she agreed to visit the base of some unknown secret order known as Masters of the Mystic Arts, but all of her worries were blown away when the strange bald woman showed them her library. Chapter 74, The Boy Who Trained, 3. So, what can you tell me about my powers? Harry asked curiously as he along with the Ancient One stared down at the courtyard where the Masters of the Mystic Arts were practicing martial arts. He realized this was probably the best time to ask her this, as Brittany was already busy checking out the mundane history books in the library and Jacqueline was checking out the weapons in the armory. Your magical core turned into something like a self-sustaining nuclear reactor, producing huge amounts of energy. Not only that, your reactor can adapt to any supernatural energy to fuel your spells. Your IQ has also increased several folds, and you have also gained perfect memory, the Ancient One revealed, making Harry stare at her in interest. Is that all? Harry asked, only for the Ancient One to scoff at his question. I wouldn't have gone to meet you personally if that was all. There is much more to your powers, but I can't tell you everything, the Ancient One answered with a mirthless smile on her face. Can't or won't? Harry asked as he narrowed his eyes at her. She promised him answers, and now she was trying to subvert their deal. Won't, the Ancient One confirmed curtly. You see, the future is ever-changing. You have heard about the butterfly effect, right? The Ancient One asked, only for Harry to nod his head. Seeing him nod his head, the Ancient One decided to continue. So, you know that even the smallest action could drastically affect the future, the Ancient One explained. Where are you going with this? Harry asked as he inclined his head in confusion. If I tell you everything about your powers, then I am setting you up on a path which isn't yours, but if you go on to discover powers on your own, then you will be walking down on a path you paved," the Ancient One answered, and after a couple of minutes of silence, Harry finally nodded his head in understanding. "So, you can perceive the future?" Harry asked, making her go stiff as both of them knew that it wasn't a question. "That is why you came to get me before Charles Xavier could get to me, didn't you?" Harry asked, but once again both of them knew that it was a rhetorical question. The Ancient One knew that she needed to be careful and there was no use in lying. "You know, your powers are making you quite scary," the Ancient One commented as she cast him a wary look. "As for both of your questions, the answer is yes," the Ancient One admitted with a nod of her head. "I see. I know I am going to be a powerhouse in the future with my newfound powers. It would be impossible for anyone to control me. So, there must be a reason you didn't try to kill me," Harry stated as he continued to stare at the Ancient One. The Ancient One has been protecting the world for almost 7 centuries and he was a volatile variable. It would have been much easier for her to kill him, to avoid all the headaches, but instead of killing him, she has decided to make him stronger by teaching him. "Once again, you are right, but that comes with its own problems. You are fate's chosen. I could have killed you and then I would have to deal with Voldemort, and you are wrong, you are already a powerhouse, you simply don't know how to use your powers efficiently. You are also going to become quite a deterrent against anyone threatening Earth," the Ancient One finished her explanation, giving Harry a lot to think about. The Ancient One didn't want to make it any more easier for Harry. That is why she used the term Voldemort and not Tom Marvolo Riddle. That would have made his task a lot easier. Harry stared at her for the next few seconds with a contemplative look on his face before giving a nod in acknowledgement. "Are you sure, Hadrian? I still don't think you should trust her." Lily was worried that the woman might try to get her baby boy to change his ways. "My paranoia aside. She had been completely honest until now and I don't want to give up this chance, and there is always a chance that she might try to kill me if I deny her request regardless of the consequences," Harry argued back, and even though Lily wasn't happy, she reluctantly agreed with him. "Fine. Since you have already made up your mind, I am going to support your decision." Lily sighed in defeat, but at the same time, she couldn't help but hide her smile. Her Hadrian was finally starting to make decisions on his own. Lily knew very well that she wasn't infallible, so it was a good thing that Hadrian was finally starting to make choices on his own. "Fine. I am in your care, teacher," Harry said as he respectfully bowed his head just like he had seen the other disciples do. "There is no reason for you to bow, Harry, if you don't want to. I do know what happens to people who would want to make you bow and I don't have any intentions to end up like them," the Ancient One pointed out warily, earning a questioning look from him, but she didn't have any plans of answering him. She didn't want to give him any ideas. Time skip, 3 days. It has been 3 days since Harry accepted the Ancient One as his teacher and he had already learned a lot from her. He only needed to see a spell once or understand enough about the spell to learn it, but he would still need to practice it quite a few times to master the spells. "I think that's enough for today, don't you?" the Ancient One asked as she folded her arms in front of her. "Yes. I would need to train with Jacqueline too," Harry wondered aloud. "By the way, what do you think about dark magic?" Harry asked as he slowly stood up from the floor. "Depends," the Ancient One answered as she cocked her head sideways. "Some spells are not only dark but evil. For example, necromancy. It destroys the natural cycle. It would only create an imbalance in the world," the Ancient One explained. "There are a lot more examples, and you will learn about all of them," the Ancient One added, making Harry look at her completely surprised. "Are you sure about that? You aren't worried that I might become someone like Voldemort?" Harry asked as he raised his eyebrows at her. The Ancient One chuckled at him. "Voldemort isn't evil because of dark magic, but he is evil because of his nature. The dark magic didn't force him to go down the path he did. He walked down that path on his own accord," the Ancient One explained, making Harry nod in understanding. "Then what about Grindelwald?" Harry asked, making the Ancient One shrug. "He did have good intentions, but somewhere down the line, he lost his path, but he wasn't evil like Voldemort. Personally, I think Grindelwald was disillusioned, but I could agree with his initial motivations," the Ancient One answered thoughtfully. "I was born in a time when women were persecuted for being women. We were only considered breeding stocks. So, I can somewhat sympathize with Grindelwald's initial motivations as he was trying to take over the Muggle world so that the wizarding kind could live freely," the Ancient One added thoughtfully when she noticed the weird look on Harry's face. "I see. Harry muttered thoughtfully. Were you going to act if Dumbledore never stopped him? Harry asked, only for the Ancient One to shake her head in denial. No. I don't care if 1,000,000 people die. I wouldn't care even if 1,000,000,000 people die. I am not a world cop and it is not my duty to save everyone or protect everyone. My duty is to protect this world from mystical threats or I would have stopped Hydra, the Ancient One answered with a scoff. Hydra? Harry asked as he gave her a questioning look. You will know when the time comes, the Ancient One answered cryptically. I will trust you on that. So, you won't care if Voldemort wins? Harry asked, and the Ancient One seemed to hesitate a bit before she finally relented and started to speak. No, Voldemort is different, as I said previously. He will plunge the world into a war if he wins, and this world wouldn't be able to handle a nuclear war. Humans along with all life will go extinct if he is allowed to win. True, he isn't a mystical threat, but I will be protecting a big hunk of barren wasteland if I don't stop him, the Ancient One answered as a matter of fact. Ah. I understand, Harry said while nodding his head. By the way, I will be absent on August 7th as I have scheduled a meeting with my estranged godfather, but you already knew that, didn't you? Harry asked with a knowing look on his face. 2 days ago, he finally wrote down a letter, addressed to his godfather, saying that he wanted to meet and posted it through Gringotts. I do, the Ancient One admitted with a smile on her face. All right. Then I will be taking my leave. Thank you, teacher. Harry respectfully bowed his head before he finally started to leave. It was finally time for him to return as Jacqueline was waiting for him to start the training session. Harry arrived at the backyard and he was about to open a portal when he heard a voice from behind. So, you are finally done. Chapter 75, The Boy Who Trained, 4. So, you are finally done. Harry heard a man's voice from behind and he slowly turned around to find Carl Mordo, another one of the Ancient One's students. Harry didn't know what to think of the man. There were quite a few masters of the mystic arts who were quite displeased with the Ancient One for giving Harry special treatment, and Carl Mordo was one of them. Carl Mordo is someone rigid and unwilling to make compromises. He is a stickler for rules and he believes that the only way to win is to kill your enemy. The man had a stick shoved so far up his ass that sometimes Harry wondered how the man was able to turn his head. At least, Mordo seemed to be quite grateful to the Ancient One for whatever reason and never tried to bully Harry or anything like that. Whereas, Caecilius was a much easier man to read. Caecilius was filled with rage and anger for whatever reason, but unlike Mordo, he wasn't displeased by Harry's presence. In fact, Caecilius always praised Harry for his incredible talent and learning capabilities. He was rather a strict and harsh man, but he knew how to praise someone for their achievements. Yeah, I was about to return. Is there something I can help you with? Harry asked as he stared at the man contemplatively. He didn't even sense the man approaching him, and if the man hadn't spoken, then Harry wouldn't have noticed him. Harry realized that he needed to ask the Ancient One to teach him some sort of presence-sensing technique. You know, I was wondering what is so special about you. What is the reason for you getting special treatment? Mordo asked as he stepped forward. I don't know. Why don't you go and ask the Ancient One? Harry suggested nonchalantly. I did ask her, but she didn't tell me anything. That is why I am asking you. I simply want to understand. The man spoke dispassionately. I want to understand what makes you better than the rest of us, the man added as he arrived right in front of Harry. Harry stared straight into his eyes and shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. It might have something to do with my talent, or I might be a better student, Harry said nonchalantly, and Mordo almost snapped, but he held himself back. Hey! Smart, Harry internally mused. The thing was that people like Mordo thought that they could deal with Harry if they could get close to him, since he never trained in martial arts like them, but they couldn't be any more wrong. He was aware of the fact that he would definitely lose if he tried to fight Mordo or any of the other masters of mystic arts in strictly physical combat, but Harry wasn't planning to engage in physical combat with anyone. At least, not yet. Harry was quite aware of his shortcomings, but even with his newfound powers, it was simply impossible for him to learn everything at once. I don't like him, Lily stated angrily, and Harry had to agree with her. He could never get along with someone like Mordo, who worships law and order. You should get rid of him, Lily demanded. Harry couldn't help but feel wary on the inside at his mom's demand. Not yet, Mom. Not yet. Though if he becomes a problem for me and mine, then I will remove him, Harry promised, as he didn't want to kill someone just because his mom didn't like someone. If he followed that logic, then he would need to kill practically almost everyone on the planet, as his mom didn't like anyone except for a handful few. Fine. Fine. If that's what you want, Lily accepted grumpily, but she decided to drop the matter. Is that what you really believe? Mordo asked with a snort, only for Harry to hum noncommittal. I am not sure, yet. I will let you know when I find out, all right? Harry asked with a beaming smile on his face, making Mordo growl in anger as he ground his teeth. Mordo huffed as he turned around on his heel and left without saying anything else. You shouldn't provoke him like that, Caecilius said as he stepped out of the shadow with a hard look on his face. For the second time, Harry cursed himself for not knowing a means to sense someone's presence. He is a very dangerous man, Caecilius said stiffly. I agree. It probably wasn't wise. Harry nodded his head in agreement and Caecilius nodded his head in approval. You at least know how to accept your shortcomings. It's not something I can say about the others, Caecilius commented airily as he stepped forward. Your problem is, you think you can handle Mordo, and maybe you are right, but you shouldn't underestimate him, Caecilius commented. Is there a spell, which can alert me in case someone is approaching me or watching me from a dark corner? Harry asked curiously, and after a few moments of silence, Caecilius gave him a nod. I will show you the spell once, but I believe that will be enough, Caecilius sniffed as he raised his hands and cast the spell. Harry, who was paying rapt attention to his actions, immediately knew how to cast the spell. When Caecilius was done with the demonstration, he dismissed the spell and placed his hands behind his back. Give it a try, Caecilius demanded authoritatively. Harry raised his hands and cast the spell without any difficulties. Caecilius stared at him in complete awe. I still can't believe that you can learn spells just by watching someone cast them once, Caecilius breathed out as he stared at Harry's hands. This is exactly what I was looking for, Harry muttered, completely ignoring Caecilius. He could sense everything within 10 meters around him, but all of a sudden, he frowned. This is an active spell, Harry groaned in annoyance. Now, I will need to modify the spell, Harry muttered under his breath as he already started to think of ways to modify the spell. Caecilius frowned at Harry's words and decided to watch his actions. Caecilius knew that Harry was much more than a simple prodigy, as he had Harry in action. The boy could learn spells that had taken him weeks or months in an instant. Meanwhile, Harry dismissed the spell and started to contemplate as he started to pace, completely ignoring Caecilius. The spell worked like a radar. The spell was working perfectly, so he wouldn't need to modify the core spell, but he would need to modify the activation mechanics, which wasn't that hard. Harry snapped his fingers and his body flashed with a golden glow. Amazing! Caecilius breathed out in complete awe. How did you do that so quickly? Caecilius asked in astonishment. It wasn't that hard. If you want, I can teach you the spell and you will understand how I did it, Harry said, and Caecilius immediately nodded his head. After that, Harry started to show him how to cast the spell, and after his third try, Caecilius finally succeeded. Simply wonderful! Caecilius exclaimed, looking completely excited. Such an elementary modification, but I highly doubt anyone besides you could have done it, Caecilius praised. You are giving me too much credit, Harry waved off his hand, but before Caecilius could say anything else, Harry began to speak again. Caecilius, I need to go, Harry said, and the man nodded his head in understanding. All right, but meet me when you are back. I want to discuss some spells with you, Caecilius said as he walked away without waiting for Harry's answer. Harry simply sighed and started to open a portal straight into Jacqueline's backyard. He stepped through the portal, but Jacqueline was nowhere to be seen. Jackie! Harry called out loudly, but he received no answer. He started to wonder if something happened, but the Ancient One had cast a spell on Jacqueline and Brittany so that Charles Xavier won't be able to find them anymore, so Harry wasn't worried about that. He finally arrived in front of the table and noticed a small note. Instead of touching the note, he used his magic to levitate the letter and open it. Harry, I am out shopping with Brittany. Ask Morcy to make something while you wait, and now, no need to sulk. I would have loved to bring you along, but I don't think you would have liked shopping underwear with us. Harry read the note and made a face before vanishing it with a simple thought. His face scrunched in discomfort when he heard his mom laugh roaringly inside his mind. He huffed and plopped down on one of the chairs before he started to practice some of the healing spells he read in the 6th year books. He wanted to see if could reach a stage where he could instantly heal from any wounds using his magic. He knew that with enough practice he would succeed, but he still needed to practice the spells if he ever wanted to reach that level. By the way, when are you going to start learning legilimency? Lily asked all of a sudden. I admit, it would be quite useful, but I need a target to practice on. Jacqueline is there, but I am yet to hang on my magic. I might end up ripping her mind into shreds, Harry answered after a few seconds of silence. That's true, Lily agreed. You can always find some criminals to practice legilimency, Lily suggested eagerly, making Harry sigh. Not yet. If I don't find another way, then that is what I will do. Harry decided to shelf the option for the time being and continued to practice the healing spells.